Chapter 377. As time went by, Jean Wan's tightly curled body on the sofa gradually relaxed, but her hand was still covering her stomach. Unknowingly, she fell asleep in the torment and waiting. She slept very soundly, but she also had a series of dreams. When Jean Wan turned over and felt the weight of the quilt on her body, she opened her eyes, looked down at the quilt, and found that she was lying on the bed in the bedroom. Didn't she lie on the sofa last night because of a stomachache? Didn't she fall asleep on the sofa just like that? How did she end up in the bed? Jean Wan sat up, looked down, and saw that she was still wearing the same clothes as last night. Did Immerse carry her in? As soon as this idea came to her mind, Jean Wan's heart leaped with joy. She lifted the quilt, got up, and hurried out of the bedroom. However, as soon as she walked out, she saw a strange ant cleaning the room of Aolon International. When she turned to see Jean Wan with sleepy eyes, she smiled politely at her. "You're awake?" Jean Wan was no longer surprised that someone would come in to clean here. She smiled politely at the ant, looked in the direction of the study, and asked, "Is Mr. Mo still here?" Mr. Mo left after 6 o'clock. The ant wiped the coffee table with a clean rag and said, "I came at 6 o'clock and saw you sleeping on the sofa without even covering yourself with the quilt, so I helped you into the bedroom to sleep." Mr. Mo left very early. He should be in the company now. The little flame that had just risen in Jean Wan's heart was instantly extinguished as if a basin of cold water had been poured over it. "You helped me into the bedroom?" Jean Wan fixed her eyes on the ant. The ant was still wiping the coffee table and the surrounding table pillars. She didn't look at Jean Wan and said seriously while wiping, "Yes, it's still a little cold indoors in spring. I thought you might catch a cold if you slept like this, so I helped you in." Jean Wan didn't speak anymore, turned to the study, opened the door, and walked in. She saw that the computer, books, and other things in the study had been tidied up by the ant, and there was no trace of Mo Jingshan's work last night. It seemed that she was the only one here last night and no one else had existed. The ant cleaned up the room so quickly that the room was filled with the light and elegant fragrance of freshener and washed things, but there was no smell of Mo Jingshan. "Would you like breakfast? I've made toast and milk in the kitchen. If you don't like it, I can make some porridge or noodles." The auntie turned to wash her hands and then came out to ask Jean Wan. "I'm not hungry," Jean Wan said indifferently and was about to return to the bedroom. "But you have to eat breakfast. You don't look well. Are you feeling unwell?" "No, maybe it's because I didn't sleep well." Jean Wan didn't want to say more. She went back to the bedroom and closed the door. Then in an instant, her legs seemed to lose strength, and she leaned against the door without moving. Mo Jingshan couldn't even be bothered to look at her. When he returned to the study, he was so cold and decisive. How could he possibly care if she had a stomachache on the sofa in the living room? Was he really thinking too highly of himself? Jean Wan closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she looked out of the window. From this angle, she could see where the Mo Corporation building was. The building was dozens of floors high and had a fully tempered modern exterior. It was particularly eye-catching among the many high-rise buildings around it. Her eyes were fixed on the top floor of the building. The glass on all sides reflected the golden rays of the sun, but it was so cold that she couldn't see the staff coming and going inside and the man in a certain top-floor office. Not long after, the auntie came to knock on the door. Jean Wan opened the door, and the auntie handed her a glass of hot milk. "Have a glass of hot milk. It's better for your stomach to drink it hot." "Thank you, I don't." Jean Wan suddenly paused and looked up at the kind auntie. "How do you know I have a stomachache?" The auntie paused and then smiled at her kindly and gently. "When you fell asleep on the sofa, your hand was pressed against your stomach, so I thought you might have a stomachache or stomach discomfort." "Is that so?" Jean Wan asked. The auntie smiled again. "You'd better drink the milk while it's hot." Seeing that the auntie didn't intend to answer, Jean Wan took the glass, touched the edge of the moderately warm glass, and then looked at the thin auntie. The auntie looked thinner than her. How could she possibly support her? Jean Wan clearly remembered that she had been sleeping soundly. If she had been supported back to the bedroom, she would have felt something, but she didn't feel anything at that time. Besides, the auntie was so thin. Even if she had been supported, she couldn't have been so steady. If she had been carried, the auntie would never have been able to carry her. Besides, she was usually very alert when she slept. Unless the person holding her was Imo Jingshan, she would habitually feel safe and wouldn't suddenly wake up. The apartment in Aolan International was so large that the distance from the sofa in the living room to the bedroom was not close. During the period when she was taken into the bedroom, if the auntie had supported her, how could she not have felt anything? Jean Wan put the glass to her mouth, slowly took a sip, and then looked at the auntie again. Seeing that the auntie didn't look at her for too long, she smiled and turned back to do her work. Jean Wan stood by the door, drank the milk, looked at the sofa, and then looked back at the bed in the bedroom. The period after returning to High City was the busiest. Not only was Imo Jingshan busy, but Jean Wan was also very busy. With the steady and gradual rise of the domestic real estate industry in the past 6 months, her studio had become the hottest cooperation target of many real estate companies. For a long time, Jean Wan had to travel all over the country to acquire potential land in other cities or to expand the studio's other business projects, including some projects related to the tourism industry. The income was indeed considerable, and Jean Wan's figure appeared in the domestic financial news again and again. For 2 whole months, she didn't stay in High City much. When she came back to rest for a day or two, she had to attend meetings in the studio or receive tenders and managers of certain real estate companies. Occasionally, she would take a few hours to go back to the U Garden or Aolan International, but she didn't see Imo Jingshan. Chapter 378. Jean Wan knew that this was an achievement that Imo Jingshan could have achieved 10 years ago, but for Imo Jingshan 10 years later, everything was within his reach. Jean Wan's studio was also becoming more and more mature. She gradually had to deal with some more high-end partners and occasionally had to fly to Hong Kong, Japan, and other places. She was very busy. And in the next month, Jean Wan lingered in the company of her partner in the United States for a contract worth $300 million. This time, only she and Xia Tian were in the United States. Every day, they were busy with work and meeting the superiors and leaders of the business partners. They could hardly leave the company and the hotel. During this period, when she had time, she would call the U Garden and ask if Imo Jingshan had gone back to live recently. The answer was no. The password of Aolan International was still her birthday and hadn't been changed. Every time she went back, Imo Jingshan didn't go back to live. When she was very busy, Jean Wan would only send a text message to Imo Jingshan before going to bed, telling him what contracts she had signed today or what problems she had faced today. Imo Jingshan's text messages were changed to no longer have a receipt system, which meant that whether he saw them or not, Jean Wan would no longer be marked as read or unread. So Jean Wan didn't know whether he saw what she occasionally wanted to say to him or not. But he didn't reply to any of her text messages. As for calling Imo Jingshan, she had indeed called him. In the first busy month, when she finally found time to rest, she called him to talk to him. The first few times, the call went through, but the man was still cold and distant. No matter what she said, he would just say a few words and hang up the phone. Or he would directly ask her on the phone when she would come back to sign the divorce agreement and tell her not to waste any more time with him. Every time she called him, she was half frozen to death and then died. Jean Wan didn't want to hear him mention the divorce again, so she simply stopped calling him and changed to text messages. But he really didn't reply. It was really terrible for a man who was deeply in love to suddenly be heartless. Such a busy work lasted for more than 3 months. High City spring had long passed and summer had come. Not long ago, Shine in the United States held several shareholder meetings and released a piece of news that Shine Group would begin to expand into the internet field in China and set up an internet company in High City. It would be temporarily incorporated into the merged Shine Mo Corporation and would be fully managed by Imo Jingshan. Shine in the United States would send a project leader to assist in the management of the new company. Mo Jingshan became busier. Even when Jin Wan finally returned to a stable pace of life and was no longer so busy, she could hardly see him. He was either in the company or on a business trip. He was traveling around the world, but he was not in her sight. It was as if he was very far away from her world. Jin Wan had taken some time to chat with Shenmu. Shenmu said that CEO Mo was really busier than ever. In fact, there were many times when he could find time to rest, but he was like a cold machine, indifferent to everything and almost treating the company as his home. Sometimes, he was so busy that he didn't even have time to eat. Often, when everyone got off work and went to rest, he was still busy with meetings with other foreign partners. When everyone went to work in the morning, they would often find that CEO Mo hadn't slept all night. No one knew why CEO Mo was forcing himself to be so busy now. Shenmu couldn't understand it either, but the company was indeed developing at a terrible speed. Jin Wan really couldn't find Mo Jingshan. This feeling was as if she was in China, and he was also in China. It was not like the past when he went to the United States and ignored her for 10 years. But now, the pace of their lives seemed to have returned to that life that had nothing to do with each other. She didn't agree to divorce him, nor did she sign the divorce agreement. He was her husband, but she couldn't even see him. Jin Wan knew that he was too busy these days, so she didn't bother him. No matter how busy he was, he couldn't be busy for a lifetime. She had the patience to wait for him. Mo Wan's studio. A stack of documents was placed on the desk. Jin Wan glanced at the contents on the page, then lowered her head to read other documents without saying a word. "Why are you so gloomy recently?" Xia Tian, who was at the desk, pushed the documents aside, leaned against the desk, lowered her head to approach her, and asked her. "Really? Maybe I'm too tired. Why don't you try going on business trips for several months?" Jin Wan turned another page and said indifferently, "I just came back to rest for a few days. I guess I haven't adjusted my state of mind yet. I think you've been short of a man's nourishment for too long." Xia Tian sneered. "I find that since you came back from the United States with Mo Jingshan, you two seem to have little contact. He's busy, and you're busy. But why hasn't he come to pick you up recently when you rarely have a break? I heard from Xiao Ba that Mo Jingshan used to pick you up often. You said he's busy, and I'm busy. How can he have time to pick me up?" Jin Wan didn't even lift her eyelids. "Is that so?" Xia Tian raised her eyebrows and said, "Don't keep it to yourself. Is there something wrong with your relationship?" Jin Wan, who had just picked up the pen to sign at the bottom of the document, suddenly paused, and the last tick of her name was suddenly lengthened. She stared at her messed up name and paused for a long time. Then she silently put down the pen, threw the document back on the desk, and looked up at Xia Tian. "Do you want to have a drink with me when you have time?" Xia Tian's eyelids twitched, and she waved her hand with a look of disgust. "Forget about drinking. With your alcohol tolerance, drinking with you is like sending you into a pit of fire. I won't cause this kind of trouble. If you want to drink, I will definitely not accompany you." Jin Wan, "I've been a good drinker recently, and I've drunk a little in the last few social engagements. Although it's not much, it's much better than before. Didn't Xiao Ba secretly change your wine to fruit wine every time you went to a social engagement? You should thank the heavens that you have such a considerate little assistant who's afraid that you'll be taken advantage of. Right now, many of the business partners in our studio have been drooling over you for a long time. If they didn't know you were Mo Jingshan's wife, their claws would have long been on you. It's just that these people don't dare to offend the Mo family. Do you really think the wine you usually drink at social engagements is low in alcohol content? It's all because Xiao Ba changed it for you to protect you. Chapter 379. How come I don't see anyone coveting me? Jin Wan raised her eyebrows. When I went to dinner with you several times, I saw someone asking for your phone number. Pa, isn't it because they know you have Mo Jingshan backing you up? Even if they wanted to poach you, they wouldn't dare to. Thus, they settled for the next best thing, hoping to develop some ambiguous relationship with me. TSK, these people don't even think about it. Am I that kind of person? Jean Wan squinted at her. Aren't you that kind of person? Last time, who was the one who drank too much and was carried to a hotel by a male classmate during a gathering with her old classmates? Then she was discovered by her criminal police boyfriend. The two of them quarreled until now and haven't reconciled yet, right? Xia Tian, nothing to say? Do you think everyone doesn't know your way of life? Although your temperament is simple and straightforward, and you're very loyal to your relationship, you give others the feeling that you're particularly unreliable and casual when it comes to relationships. You're also stubborn and don't like to explain. If there's a misunderstanding, you just hold it in. You're crazy. Tell me, how many people can stand you? I can't stand that stone anymore. He is smelly and hard. No wonder he came from a rich family to become a criminal police officer. He should have been an old cadre in the 1980s. Why does he have to control me all the time? Let's have a cold war. At worst, we can just break up. I don't want to serve you anymore. Jean Wan, Why are you sneering? Xia Tian glared at her. What are you laughing at? Last time, who was the one who took the initiative to break up with him, causing him to agree in a fit of anger? Then, he called me and cried for half the night. Until he calmed down, I didn't dare to go to the police station to find him. In the end, after they finally reconciled, I carefully held on to him all day long. The only thing missing was calling him uncle every day. Who was that? Now you want to break up with him? How on earth can he stand you with such a bad temper? Xia Tian picked up the documents on the table and threw them hard on the table. Jean Wan, let's break up. Oh, take care. I won't see you out. Xia Tian snorted but didn't leave. She leaned on her desk, cupped her face in her hands, and put on a cute expression. Honey, I don't want to drink. If you are in a bad mood, I'll go shopping with you, okay? The corner of Jean Wan's lips twitched. Just use your winking skills on your boyfriend. Can you not harm me like this? If you have the time to act cute, you might as well have a good chat with him. Xia Tian refused to have a heart-to-heart talk with a certain someone. The smile on her face disappeared and she looked at Jean Wan seriously. Are you going to accompany me shopping or not? What do you want to buy? Jean Wan furrowed her brows and pushed her arm. Move aside, you're pressing against my documents. Xia Tian crossed her legs and swung them in the air. It's been too hot recently. My shoes are not comfortable to wear. I'm going to change into a new pair of shoes. As she spoke, she lowered her head to glance at Jean Wan's feet. The shoes you're wearing today are rubbing against your feet. Don't you know that? The skin on your ankles has turned red. Don't you feel any pain? Hearing this, Jean Wan lowered her head to take a look. When she came to the studio in the morning, she drove and didn't walk much. Later, when she had a meeting, she walked back and forth in the corridor of the studio for a while and did feel a little pain. However, Xiaoba had something to talk to her about, and they went to the meeting room while talking, so Jean Wan didn't take it too seriously. Later, when she returned to the office, she had been sitting here, and the pain had lessened a lot. Reminded by Xia Tian, Jean Wan moved her feet. It does hurt a little. Xia Tian patted her desk. Then let's go shopping and buy shoes together. After the meeting with the partners at 1 p.m., we can get off work early at 3 p.m. Let's go downtown together. What do you think? Jean Wan didn't speak. She had planned to call Mo Jingshan tonight because she had asked Shen Mu in the morning. Shen Mu said that CEO Mo would be in the company today and had no meetings or social engagements in the evening. But seeing Xia Tian's eager expression, Jean Wan couldn't bear it. All right. I haven't been shopping in a long time. Two women in a bad mood, apart from drinking to drown their sorrows, can only go shopping. You don't even plan to go shopping with me? Jean Wan held her forehead. It's you who wants to break up, not me. Who said I'm in a bad mood? You wear a resentful face every day. Don't you feel it? Mo Jingshan has been so busy recently that he probably doesn't have time to talk to you. In the past, you were as happy as a peach every day. You almost let others know that you and your husband are having a good time every night, but now you're obviously in the cold palace. Do you dare to say that you're in a good mood? Why did there have to be such a creature in this world that could see through your thoughts at a glance? It really didn't feel good to be seen through at a glance. When they left the studio, it was already 3:30 p.m. Many large shopping malls didn't close until 10 p.m., but some more unique malls closed at 4:30 p.m. After leaving the studio, the two women raced all the way to the commercial street in the center of High City. Xia Tian had been thinking of coming here to eat Japanese food. The two of them didn't eat much in the studio at noon, but now they were in a hurry to go to the mall, so they could only go to the mall with an empty stomach and come out to eat after buying shoes. Jean Wan didn't go shopping as she used to. If she wanted to buy shoes, she would go directly to the shoe store and finish the task quickly. Xia Tian said very unhappily that she came here today only to complete the task of buying shoes and had no intention of shopping at all. Aren't you just here to buy shoes? If you want to buy something else, just go buy it. My ankles have been worn out. How far can I go? Jean Wan sat on a long leather chair in the middle of a high-end shoe store, watching Xia Tian, who was going back and forth by the shoe cabinet, and said absent-mindedly as she browsed the news on her cell phone. Xia Tian turned back and rolled her eyes at her. Then hurry up and choose a pair of shoes. When your ankles get blisters, you'll know how painful it is. Jean Wan looked up at the shoes in this store. She and Xia Tian liked a lot of the same things, such as the style, color, brand, and so on. Just as Jean Wan glanced at a pair of shoes placed in the glass window of this store, she suddenly saw two figures passing by outside the glass window. It was a man and a woman. Chapter 380. At the moment when Jean Wan's eyes suddenly froze outside the glass window, Xia Tian happened to turn around while trying on her new shoes and caught a glimpse of the people passing by outside. Xia Tian's eyelids trembled and she said abruptly, "What the hell? Why would CEO Mo and that what's her name again? And Shuyan? Why are they here?" The next moment, Xia Tian suddenly paused and turned to look at Jean Wan with a jerk. Some time ago, she did hear a piece of news. Shine Group, the new internet company established in China, had sent An Shuyan to High City. However, Jean Wan just sat there silently, put on the shoes that hurt her feet, and stood up as if she couldn't feel the pain. She walked to the door and watched the couple walk to the other side. Perhaps it was a woman's sixth sense, or perhaps An Shuyan had already seen Jean Wan sitting here, but when Jean Wan walked to the door and looked out, An Shuyan turned her head to Mo Jingshan and whispered something with a smile. Mo Jingshan's back was still facing this direction, so she couldn't see his expression. At this time, Xia Tian put on her shoes and rushed out. Jean Wan subconsciously raised her hand to hold her, asking in a low voice, "What are you doing?" "I'm going to beat the mistress." Xia Tian glared at her and looked like she was about to explode. What the hell does Mo Jingshan mean? Doesn't he love you so much that it almost penetrates into his bones? Now he's going shopping with a woman who's always harboring evil intentions towards him. Is he falling in love with someone else or trying to put a green hat on your head? Look at that An Shuyan, she's smiling so happily. Damn it. Let go of me and let me go. Jean Wan put all her strength into her hand and held Xia Tian's hand tightly. Don't go. Why are you so scared? Now your husband is shopping with another woman. Jean Wan, how can you tolerate this? Xia Tian glared at her angrily. Of course not. She was not scared. She didn't believe that Mo Jingshan didn't see her. This man had always been very perceptive. Even though she had been sitting in the window, there was no one else in the shoe store. When they walked over, they would have seen Xia Tian standing by the shoe cabinet and her. Mo Jingshan didn't believe that Mo Jingshan had not seen her. That's right, Mo Jingshan used to love her to the bone. But now, he really froze her entire body, flesh, and even her bones. Inch by inch, he cruelly extracted her like ice shards. Jean Wan, they've already left. I know. You really don't plan to go? Why would I go there? When she turned back, she saw that Shuyan and Mo Jingshan were in a beverage area dozens of meters away from the mall. And Shuyan was buying coffee, and the man's tall and straight figure was still there. Damn it. Xia Tian struggled to break free again. She wanted nothing more than to slap Shuyan across the face and send her to the 18th level of hell. Jean Wan, however, dragged her away. Why are you leaving? Xia Tian looked at him with disappointment. Jean Wan, you're not usually so timid. Bring out the temper you had when you were screwing those rich ladies. If you dare to be a steamed bun, I will be the first to not forgive you. This kind of thing definitely cannot be tolerated. Jean Wan didn't say a word but pulled her hard in another direction. Xia Tian didn't expect her to be so strong. She stomped her feet angrily and was dragged more than 10 meters away. When she followed Jean Wan to the elevator, Xia Tian looked back again. Seeing that they were still there, she angrily rolled her eyes. After entering the elevator and reaching the first floor, Jean Wan let go of her and walked out quickly without looking back. Xia Tian wanted to call her back. The mistress was so arrogant. She couldn't let her go like this. But before she spoke, she suddenly paused, looked at Jean Wan's feet with a jerk, and hurried to catch up with her. Don't your feet hurt? Don't go. Just now, they were almost blistered. If you walk like this, you will die of pain. It doesn't hurt. Jean Wan said indifferently and then continued to walk out without stopping, as if there was something terrible chasing her and biting her in the largest department store in High City. She couldn't wait to get as far away from it as possible. Jean Wan didn't say anything. It would be strange if it didn't hurt. Xia Tian saw that the skin on her ankle, which had been rubbed red before, was now broken. Perhaps this kind of pain couldn't compare to the pain in her heart. Oh, you can't wear these shoes anymore. Let's not go shopping. Let's buy a pair of comfortable shoes on the roadside and put them on. Xia Tian caught up with her and said in a much softer tone. She knew Jean Wan too well. People like Jean Wan could be two extremes. When she was very stubborn, no one could bully her, but if she chose to retreat now, it meant that she couldn't hold up the mentality to fight and that she was more vulnerable than others thought. Jean Wan didn't go back to the studio. After leaving the mall, she drove Xia Tian back to her place and then drove back to the U Garden. It happened to be the weekend tomorrow and the next 2 days. Jean Wan felt that she might need to rest for 2 days. She shut herself in the bedroom of the U Garden and didn't go out for 2 days. Auntie Chen came to ask her to eat, but she didn't go downstairs. Auntie Chen had to bring up the cooked food for her, only to find that Jean Wan had only taken a few mouthfuls of the porridge for breakfast and barely touched lunch and dinner. The U Garden was really too big, and the bedroom was empty and too quiet. After passing by him in the mall, Jean Wan didn't send any messages to Mo Jingshan, nor did she call him or Shenmu. In the past 2 days, Xia Tian came to accompany her once. Auntie Chen was afraid that she was uncomfortable because she had no appetite, so she went upstairs again and again to ask about her physical condition. Mo Jingshan didn't come back. It was as if he had completely walked out of her world. In the past 2 days, Jean Wan clearly understood one thing. In terms of who was more heartless and cruel, she was afraid that she really couldn't compare to Mo Jingshan. When he loved her, he could give her the greatest happiness and tenderness in the world, but when he decided not to love her anymore, he would uproot himself from her world, including his flesh and blood. He wouldn't care whether she was in pain or not. He only cared whether he left quickly or not. Could he really be so heartless to her, so completely? Staying at home for 2 days, Jean Wan felt a little dizzy. When she got up on Monday morning, she almost couldn't get up. She rubbed her hair and forced herself to sit up. On the weekends, she could indulge herself and not eat if she didn't want to, but today she had to go to work and needed strength. So when Auntie Chen called her for breakfast, this time, Jin-won obediently went downstairs to eat. Although she didn't eat much, she tried hard to eat some. She wasn't the kind of person who couldn't live with her body when she encountered a little blow. Life had to go on, and so did work. There was no turning back in life. In her previous life, she fell again and again because she was too confused and too weak. Chapter 381. Boss, you are in a bad state of mind. Did you go out and stay up late to have fun during the weekend? You look more haggard on vacation than when you are on vacation, Xiao Ba said as she followed Jin-won out of the conference room. Yes, I didn't sleep well, Jin-won answered flatly. You can't stay like this. Next month, our studio will officially move to the office building in the city center. Now even the sign of our studio has been hung up. Our company's housewarming party will be held for 3 days in a row. All the partners and clients will probably come. You look like you will fall down at any time. You have to sleep well and eat well during the vacation. Otherwise, I'm afraid you won't be able to stand it for a day. Okay. Seeing that Jin-won didn't seem to want to talk, Xiaoba didn't follow her and went back to the office. At this time, Xia Tian happened to come over. She took a look at Xiaoba and then at Jin-won and asked Xiaoba to go back to the assistant's office with a stern face. When Xiaoba left, Xia Tian looked at Jin-won, who obviously didn't eat or sleep well. I thought you would feel better if I let you rest at home for a few days, but look at you now. I might as well rush up and give Shuyen a slap. It's better than being so wronged now. Okay, that's enough. Jin-won put a stack of documents in her hand. Go to Jiang City with me these 2 days. There is a problem with a piece of land in the tourist area. At that time, the document issued to me by Jiang City was missing a stamp. Now the higher-ups are using this reason to refuse to give us the ownership of the land, but the money has been paid. Xiao Ba and the others can't handle this kind of behavior. We'll go in person. Recently, as long as Jin-won talked about work, she was like a clockwork machine. She didn't care about anything except work. Xia Tian didn't know what was wrong with her before. Now she finally knew. Are you sure you want to go to Jiang City at this time? Are you going to give your man to others? Xia Tian asked with an ugly face. Jin-won, who had just pushed the door into the office, stiffened and said indifferently, and Shuyen has been in High City for more than a month, and I didn't know it until 2 days ago. If something really happened, it would have happened long ago. What can I do in High City? I can't see her in High City. It makes no difference. With that, Jin-won went straight in. Xia Tian was extremely angry, but seeing Jin-won's sudden coldness, she did not know how much she had endured in her heart. Although they were good sisters, if Jin-won refused to do anything, she couldn't do anything. She had to get her friend's permission to do anything for her friend. Otherwise, even if she went to Mo Jingshan with a knife, it would only bring her the opposite effect. Xia Tian followed him into the office. Then let's go to Jiang City for 2 days. The temperature there is higher than in High City. Should we prepare 2 swimsuits and go to the newly developed seascape tourist area in Jiang City for a night? Not interested. Jin-won sat down behind her desk and lowered her head to look at the documents. Her reply was cold and indifferent. Xia Tian choked. The biggest difference between her and Jin-won was that when Xia Tian was in a bad mood or had emotional problems, she would find a way to vent her anger and get happier and happier. But Jin-won, on the other hand, began to restrain herself. She was no longer as arrogant and domineering as she used to be. She had forced herself to be too calm and rational. Now, in Xia Tian's view, it was really uncomfortable to hold back. In the afternoon, Jin-won was still reading the documents when suddenly there was a knock on the office door, and Xiao Ba came in with a large bouquet of roses. Jin-won looked up at the roses and glanced at her strangely. What's this? Xiao Ba coughed and then said in a low voice, "These are flowers from Mr. Vince, the general manager of BGY Group. In fact, he has been sending you flowers for almost 2 months. He sends you such a large bouquet of red roses every day." Seeing Jin Wan frowning coldly and not speaking, Xiao Ba said, "But Sister Xia Tian and I stopped these flowers. Sister Xia Tian has stopped so many pursuers for you. She usually doesn't let me tell you about this kind of thing. She just tells you to work in the studio and leave the other things to her, but today the flowers were delivered on time. I was going to throw them away out of habit, but Sister Xia Tian said that if anyone sends you flowers in the future, she won't stop them and asked me to bring them to you." Looking at the bouquet of flowers, Jin Wan raised her hand to her forehead and didn't speak for a while. Xia Tian had nowhere to vent her anger, so now she simply wanted to help her develop a second love. This Mr. Vince was an overseas returnee in his 30s who looked gentle and wore gold-rimmed glasses. It was said that he had a master's degree in management overseas. At a young age, he climbed to the position of general manager of BGY Group. He was very resourceful and intelligent, but he was too shrewd and cunning. Jin Wan didn't like to deal with this kind of person, so when this man asked her to have dinner with him, she just thought he wanted to be polite to her because of their business relationship, but she politely refused him. She didn't expect that there was such a thing. No wonder every time she went to drive after work, she would find bouquets piled up in the nearby trash can. It turned out that they were all thrown out by Xia Tian and Xiao Ba. "Boss, I'll help you find a vase and put the flowers in it," Xiao Ba said and rushed to find it. "No, throw it away as usual," Jin Wan said lightly. "By the way, call Mr. Vince back and tell him not to send me flowers in the future. It's not like he doesn't know that I'm married. What's the point of flirting with me with flowers? This may be the etiquette he's used to after he came back from studying abroad. There's nothing wrong with liking you. Besides, he just sent you flowers in a gentlemanly manner and didn't do anything else. He has insisted on sending you flowers for so long. Every day when I throw them away, my heart aches." Xiao Ba muttered. Jin Wan glanced at her. "So do you think a married woman like me should happily accept the flowers that other men send me every day? And even happily put the words he sent me in your office?" Chapter 382. After arriving in Jiang City, because of the stamping problem, they were deliberately delayed by several scoundrels from the business and political circles, which caused the project of the tourist area land to be temporarily put on hold. Jin Wan and Xia Tian ran around, using their connections everywhere, and it took them 2 days to finally get the missing stamp back. Of course, they hardly rested these 2 days. Even Xia Tian had dark circles under her eyes for 2 consecutive nights, not to mention Jin Wan. On the way back, the 2 women closed their eyes to rest, too tired to say a word. "You're really going too far. Do you think we're just a small studio with no trump cards? Do you think we're just a small studio with no trump cards? You want to annex a deal worth more than 100 million yuan because of the lack of a stamp? Do you think I'm such a good-tempered person? How dare you offend us without looking at our trump cards?" Xia Tian opened her eyes and said angrily after a short nap in the car. "In any case, we've come to an agreement. We didn't lose anything. We just wasted a lot of time talking. We got the order back, and the land is officially under the name of our studio. We're lucky to have this kind of result when we go head-on against people from both the business and the political circles." Jin Wan said calmly, "We should learn a lesson in the future. This kind of document can't be left without a stamp, lest others take advantage of it again." Xia Tian sat beside her with her eyes closed, whispering, "You're not even afraid of these scoundrels. You dare to fight back, and no one dares to bully you. You can find the best way to solve such a difficult problem, but now your marriage and love have problems. Why can't you find a way to solve it?" Jin Wan opened her eyes and turned to look at the scenery outside the car window that was quickly moving backward. If he was still the old Imo Jingshan, there would be no problem with their love and marriage, and he would not allow any misunderstanding, cold war, or quarrel with her. But now Imo Jingshan, he was still him, but it seemed that he was no longer him. Jean Wan really didn't know how to face such a Mo Jingshan. When she first returned to China with him, she was full of enthusiasm, thinking that no matter what, he was the man she loved, and that no matter how high the iceberg was, it would melt one day. But he didn't even see her face and didn't even give her the chance to live under the same roof. He was busy in the company, and the company was not a place for love. After the merger of Mo Corporation and Shine, the management was stricter than before. She could not go to his company to pester him. Besides, even if she went to the company, he might not be there. Just like a few days ago, when she went to look for him, Shenmu said that President Mo was not around. It seemed that her courage had been gradually cooled and scattered. It seemed that Mo Jingshan really knew her and knew how to deal with her. When she said that she would never divorce and insisted on being with him, he didn't say anything but left her life in such a way that he didn't exist in her world, so her passion and her insistence were nothing but air. He was a man who had dominated Shine and the ruthless American business world for many years. His methods and ruthlessness were not something Jean Wan could match. It took about 3 hours to drive from Jiang City to Hai City. During these 3 hours, Jean Wan slept and woke up. When she returned to Hai City, it was already evening, but she didn't expect it to rain today. Jean Wan didn't bring an umbrella, so she went downstairs to get the car. On the way back to the Yew Garden, she passed a manhole cover that had just been overturned. The manhole cover had not been surrounded by a protective fence. The rain was too heavy for Jean Wan to see clearly, so she drove the car directly to the manhole cover, and the wheels were stuck inside. She had to get out of the car in the rain, check it, and then return to the car to make a phone call. When the person in charge of the traffic team came to help her move the car out, it was already an hour later. Jean Wan had just driven back to the Yew Garden. Auntie Chen was startled to see her. "Didn't you drive back? Why are you wet? Come on, take a hot shower, and then come out to eat some food and drink some hot water. Don't catch a cold." Jean Wan responded. As soon as she went upstairs to the bedroom, she felt dizzy and almost lost her balance. She leaned against the door for a long time, raised her hand to rub her temples, and then walked in. But she really didn't have the energy to take a shower, and her clothes were wet, so she couldn't go to bed. She simply sat on the ground like this for a while, but she felt too tired. Perhaps she had been working hard for a long time and didn't eat or sleep well. 2 days ago, when she was harassed by those rascals in Jiang City, she had been suppressing her anger. At this moment, she felt that her whole body was not well. Her ears were buzzing, as if her physical strength had reached its limit. She could finally relax, and sleepiness swept over her. After returning to the bedroom for nearly an hour, Jean Wan still didn't have the strength to go to the bathroom. In the end, she simply lay on the cold ground and looked at the crystal lamp on the ceiling. She didn't even know when she fell asleep. When the bedroom door was knocked, Jean Wan turned over on the ground and felt that the floor was too hard. She frowned and opened her eyes in a daze, only to hear Auntie Chen calling her outside the door. "Madam, have you taken a shower? Come and eat. I made you brown sugar ginger tea. Come out and drink it. Don't catch a cold. Your body is afraid of catching a cold. In the past, every time you caught a cold, you would have a high fever. I still remember it." Jean Wan struggled on the ground to sit up, raised her hand, and touched her messy hair, which was still damp and smelled of rain. Hearing that Auntie Chen was still knocking on the door, she had to get up, but she staggered on the spot, barely steadied herself, walked over, and opened the door. Auntie Chen saw her unusual face. "Oh, why do you look so pale? Haven't you taken a shower?" "No, I'll go down to eat first, and then come up to take a shower," Jean Wan said and went straight out. Seeing that she was still wearing wet clothes, Auntie Chen was about to say something, but then she remembered that Mr. Mo hadn't returned to the Yew Garden for months after Jean Wan came back, and Jean Wan had been particularly quiet during this period. Auntie Chen didn't say anything but hurriedly followed Jean Wan downstairs, thinking that they must turn off the air conditioner in the hall, in case it was too cold. Jean Wan walked down quietly. When she was still 5 or 6 steps away from the tiled floor of the hall, she felt more and more dizzy, and suddenly everything went black. She subconsciously tried to hold the handrail, but before her hand touched the handrail, she fell down, hit her head on the stairs, and sank into darkness. Chapter 383. Seeing Jean Wan's condition, the servants were startled. Someone rushed over and helped Auntie Chen to help Jean Wan up, and someone hurriedly turned to make a phone call. In a flurry, as soon as the phone was connected, Jean Wan woke up. Leaning against Auntie Chen's arms, she frowned and rubbed her aching forehead. At the same time, she heard the servant say to the phone, "Mr. M.O., Madam fainted and fell on the stairs. When can you come back, Mr. M.O.?" Hearing this, Jean Wan immediately turned her eyes. "Don't call him back. I'm fine." Her voice was very light, but the servant paused because of her words. Then she hesitated and came over with the phone. "Madam, Mr. M.O. asked me to give you the phone." Jean Wan was silent, took the phone, and put it to her ear. The man's voice on the other side of the phone was casual and indifferent, but it was as cold as ever. Hearing it, she shuddered. "What? Can't you even do the most basic healthy lifestyle? In addition to catching a cold and having a fever, you even want to cripple yourself just by walking?" Jean Wan didn't expect him to come back. Besides, she just fainted and lost her footing. However, hearing this, she still felt cold. "I didn't force you to come back. Just now, the servant was too concerned about me, so she made a fuss. Don't mind it. But the Yew Garden is our home. Are you going to never come back?" Mo Jingshan's tone was calm, making it impossible to guess his mood. "I can see that you like that place very much. The ownership of the Yew Garden property has been transferred to your name. Just this property alone is enough for you to live comfortably for the rest of your life. You won't follow the same footsteps and live a homeless life again." Of course, she wouldn't live like that again. She had her own job and a life she worked hard to support. Right now, Jean Wan really didn't have the energy to pester him about these things that were not important to her. She tightened her grip on the phone and asked again, "Are you really not going to return to the Yew Garden?" There was no answer. Mo Jingshan hung up the phone. There was a cold cut-off sound on the phone. Jean Wan listened for a long time, as if she couldn't be sure if he really hung up the phone, and as if she couldn't believe that he would suddenly hang up without saying a word to her. Mrs. M.O., Auntie Chen and the servants wanted to help her up, but Jean Wan sat on the ground, looking down at the phone screen that had gone dark. "I'm fine. I just fell." Jean Wan gently pushed Auntie Chen's hands away. "I can get up on my own. You can go and do whatever you need to do." "Madam, shall I help you to the dining table?" Auntie Chen asked softly. Jean Wan nodded. It was not until Auntie Chen helped her up that she felt dizzy again. After helping her to the dining table, Auntie Chen suddenly raised her hand and touched her forehead. "When I helped you just now, I felt that your body was very hot through your sleeves. Do you have a cold or a fever? Shall I call a doctor?" "I'm fine. It's just a little rain. It's not that serious. I'll just drink the brown sugar ginger tea you just made." The man stood in the cold office, his long legs stretched out, and he walked unhurriedly to the floor-to-ceiling window. In the rainy night, there was not the slightest bit of light from the moon and stars. Even through the window, he could feel the bone-chilling coldness falling on the pure color of the office that was filled with documents. When Qin Sighting received the call, he had just gotten off work at the hospital. Seeing that it was Mo Jingshan, he picked it up. The man on the other end of the phone spoke in a low voice, clean and clear. "Find a doctor with medical ethics and skills similar to yours to go to the Yew Garden to see Jean Wan." Qin Sighting's hand, which was about to open the car door, paused. "What's wrong with her? Don't I have to go myself?" "You don't have to go. Send someone she doesn't know." Obviously, he didn't intend to let Jean Wan know that he sent the doctor. Qin Sighting frowned and was about to ask what he meant when the phone was hung up. Jean Wan had just finished dinner and was drinking the brown sugar ginger tea Auntie Chen had made for her. Her pale face looked slightly red from the heat, and she was sweating a little. Then the doctor suddenly came. "Who called the doctor?" Jean Wan asked. "I just called Miss Feng Ling. Miss Feng said that she would ask Dr. Qin. It seems that Dr. Qin said that he wouldn't be in High City these days, so he sent a colleague from the hospital over." Auntie Chen told Jean Wan everything she had heard on the phone. Jean Wan glanced at the doctor, who smiled politely at her and said that it was Dr. Qin who sent him over. She nodded. Jean Wan's illness was not serious. It was just that she hadn't rested well these days and couldn't eat much. Her body was in a state of fatigue, and she had some signs of a cold and fever from the rain. Everything else was fine. She just needed to take cold medicine and antipyretics, rest more, drink more hot water, and eat more to maintain her strength. She understood all of this. Hearing the doctor say that there was no problem, Auntie Chen was relieved. After the doctor left, Auntie Chen urged Jean Wan to take a hot bath. Jean Wan obediently went to take a bath and obediently went back to the bedroom to sleep after taking the medicine. But when she turned over on the bed, she looked at the empty other side of the bed and reached out to touch the bed. It had been a long, long time since she had Immerse's scent and warmth here. Sure enough, when he cared about her, even the slightest headache or fever could be hugged and coaxed. It was as if she was a fragile porcelain doll when she was sick. He wanted to hold her in his hands. But now, she couldn't get sick at all. In his eyes, if there was even the slightest problem with her body, he would think that she was using some despicable trick to lure him back. Was the image of her in his heart that she would do anything to achieve her goals so deeply rooted? She felt so warm and happy when she hugged Immerse, but after all of this suddenly disappeared, she felt so lonely and lost. She wanted to give up and leave. She asked herself, did she really decide to give up like this? After such a long time, she couldn't be clearer about what kind of man Immerse was. No matter what he did, there would always be a reason. But what exactly was the reason that made a man who wasn't even afraid of death push her away again and again? Jean Wan sniffled. It was already late. Although her head hurt, she didn't feel sleepy. She sat up on the bed and stared at the snow-white wall under the lamp for a long time but still couldn't fall asleep. There were still a lot of things to do in the studio tomorrow. She had to sleep. She rubbed her head and turned to rummage through the drawer. She found a box of sleeping pills with only 2 or 3 pills. These pills seemed to have been bought by her when Ji Mengran was here. Chapter 384. After a busy day in the studio, Jean Wan had dinner with her business partners as usual. Xia Tian had declined the previous few social engagements. Today, the heads of BGY and WK came to discuss the land purchase agreement, so Jean Wan had to show up. At 8:00 in the evening, in the VIP room of the Royal Clubhouse in High City, Xiao Ba and another assistant were singing, and Jean Wan was discussing the cooperation with the head of WK. The heads of the two companies wanted her to have a few drinks with them, but seeing Jean Wan didn't look too good today, she asked for juice instead of wine, and everyone agreed. Jean Wan was the only one in the entire room who didn't drink. Xia Tian came back and winked at Jean Wan, telling her to go out and hide. Jean Wan really couldn't stand the singing of Xiao Ba and the others, and the heads of the business partners kept leaning toward her, either sitting next to her or, conveniently, putting their hands on her waist. Seeing Xia Tian's look, she got up and walked out of the room quickly. When she went out, she happened to receive a call from Feng Ling. "Mrs. Imo, I'm sorry. My mission here was delayed for more than 3 months, and I'll be leaving for High City in half a month. Is there anything I can bring back for you? You've just finished your mission. Take a break in the United States before coming back." "I'm fine here. When I hired you, I was just guarding against those people in the United States, wasn't I? Now that Su Jilan and the Su family have fallen, and Director Imo hasn't done anything to me, my life has returned to normal and peaceful. You don't have to rush back. Mr. Imo signed a 3-year employment contract with me. Now it's not even a year. Of course I have to go back as soon as possible. All right. You insist on coming back when my studio is moving. At that time, you'll probably have to do all the hard work again. You really have a busy life. Feng Ling smiled. I'll bring gifts for Xiao Ba and the others when I go back. What do you want? As long as you come back safely. By the way, you haven't cut your hair recently, have you? Didn't I tell you to keep it longer last time? I cut it. It's inconvenient when it's long. It's also convenient to tie it back. Do you like short hair so much? Isn't there a saying in China that 3,000 strands of worry? It's very comfortable and my head feels very light. Jean Wan raised her eyebrows and looked down at the slightly wavy hair hanging over her chest. After hanging up the phone, she touched her hair, wondering if Feng Ling liked short hair so much. Should she try a short haircut? Just as this thought sprouted in her mind, she turned around and walked out of the restroom. Suddenly, she caught a glimpse of a familiar figure entering the men's restroom on the opposite side. She was startled. Not long after, a tall man came out of the bathroom opposite. When he saw Jean Wan outside, he was also stunned. Mrs. Mo? Shenmu? As Jean Wan asked, she subconsciously glanced at the men's room behind him and then at the other directions around her. Although she did not ask, she subconsciously felt that wherever Mo Jingshan was in High City, Shenmu would also be there. Vice versa. If Shenmu was here, Mo Jingshan might be nearby. A business partner arranged for us to come to this club tonight. President Mo is still in the private room. Why are you here? Seeing that Jean Wan did not smell of alcohol at all, Shenmu thought she came here with her friends or to see President Mo. Several clients of my studio have also booked private rooms here. Jean Wan briefly explained, but because she heard that Mo Jingshan was here, she looked at the other private rooms. The private rooms in this club were all on this floor. Because of the large space and expensive facilities, there were only 3 of them on this floor. She saw that most of the people in the other 2 private rooms were men and asked, "Only you and Mo Jingshan are here? Are there any other acquaintances?" "No, the place is booked by a business partner tonight. It's a company that has cooperated with CEO Mo for many years. They have a good relationship with CEO Mo and will continue to carry out other international cooperation projects in the future. It's rare for CEO Mo to agree to this kind of meeting. Tonight, only I accompanied CEO Mo here. The others in the private room are all from our partner companies. There aren't many people. Mrs. Mo, would you like to go in and have a few drinks with us?" "I won't go in." "How about this, when you're done, give me a call," Jean Wan said lightly. Shenmu was a little confused. In the past few months, CEO Mo had been busy in the company, but Shenmu didn't know whether CEO Mo went home or somewhere else after leaving the company, so he didn't know what happened between Jean Wan and him. He just instinctively felt that since Jean Wan was Mrs. Mo and CEO Mo was here, she could definitely enter the private room if she wanted to. No one could stop her. But since Jean Wan said so, Shenmu nodded and said, "Okay, I got it." When Jean Wan returned to the private room, the representatives of BGY and WK saw that her complexion was much better than before and poured her a glass of fruit wine, asking her to drink with them. Jean Wan politely declined with a smile and continued to pick up the contract to discuss. Fortunately, she brought Xia Tian and Xiao Ba with her, 2 good helpers who could always liven up the atmosphere. Whenever Jean Wan refused to drink, Xia Tian would immediately come over to help. At 10:30 in the evening, when the private room was almost finished, Jean Wan received a call from Shenmu. "Mrs. Mo, we're going back. Do you want to come with us?" Jean Wan picked up the call and said goodbye to the representatives of BGY and WK. Then she said a few words to Xia Tian and Xiao Ba and left the private room a few minutes earlier. When she walked out of the club, she saw Mo Jingshan's black ghost parked in front of the door. Shenmu was waiting outside the car door, but Mo Jingshan was nowhere to be seen. Jean Wan walked over, and Shenmue directly handed her the electronic car key. "Mrs. Mo, you haven't drunk today, have you?" "I haven't. CEO Mo drank a little too much tonight. I was going to drive him back, but just now my girlfriend called and said she had a stomachache and asked me to accompany her to see a doctor. I was going to call the driver to send CEO Mo, but if you haven't drunk, since you live together, you can send CEO Mo back." Jean Wan took the car key. "Okay, then go accompany your girlfriend. Leave it to me." With that, she suddenly paused, looked at the car in front of her, and then at the closed car door. "Did he drink a lot?" Chapter 385. Jean Wan nodded and made a reassuring gesture to Shenmue. "I didn't drink, and I'm good at driving. I can send him back." "Then how did you get here?" "Your car. My colleagues in the studio are all here, and the car key is with my assistant. They will drive my car back." "It's okay." "That's good. Then I'll go first." "Sorry to trouble you, Mrs. Mo." Shenmue turned to the roadside, hailed a taxi, and hurried away. Jean Wan stood by the black ghost, looked at the cold, black car door, thought for a while, went to the driver's side, opened the door, and sat in. As she entered, she smelled a strong smell of alcohol. She turned her head and looked back, only to see Mo Jingshan sitting in the back with his eyes closed. She didn't know whether he was asleep or too drunk to open his eyes. It wasn't that she had never smelled alcohol on him before, but this was the first time she had smelled it so strongly. Furthermore, she had never seen him drink too much. His self-control was too strong, and he never indulged himself too much. Jean Wan looked at his clothes again. He was wearing a black shirt and trousers. She was right. It seemed that since he woke up from his 2-month sleep, he had been wearing this black, which made him look even colder and more unapproachable. While he kept his eyes closed and seemed to not notice that the driver had been replaced, Jean Wan started the engine and was about to drive away. Suddenly, the man's low voice rang. "Shenmue." Jean Wan didn't speak, nor did she turn her head to look back. She just looked up at the rearview mirror and saw that the man's eyes were closed. He seemed to have a headache from drinking too much and was frowning. "Give me water." His voice was hoarse and cold, and he still didn't open his eyes. Jean Wan lowered her eyes to look for water in the car until she saw an unopened bottle of mineral water on the door of the passenger seat. She picked it up and handed it to him. Mo Jingshan opened his eyes slightly. The lights in the car were not turned on, and the light from the surroundings fell into the darkness. The moment he raised his hand to receive the water, he glanced at the fair, slender fingers holding the bottle. His gaze paused for a moment before he silently received the water. He twisted the cap open and took a sip. He then closed his eyes again and leaned back against the seat, not speaking again. Feeling that he didn't seem to notice anything strange, she retracted her hand on the steering wheel, restarted the engine, and drove the black ghost away from the parking space in front of the club. She drove steadily. After all, she was no longer a newbie. The man sitting in the back was very quiet and did not say a word. Jean Wan glanced back with the rearview mirror and saw that Mo Jingshan's eyes were closed as though he had fallen asleep. 15 minutes later, the car passed by the Mo Corporation. Jean Wan continued to step on the accelerator without hesitation, not even intending to stop. When passing by Aolon International, she hesitated. Her first thought was to abduct this man back to the U Garden. After returning to China, he really wouldn't return to the U Garden, so she felt it necessary to take him home. But she was afraid that if he woke up, Auntie Chen wouldn't be able to bear his anger, so she hesitated and turned the car into Aolon International. When the car stopped, Jean Wan unfastened her seatbelt and turned back to see that he still hadn't opened his eyes. She opened the door and got out of the car. Then she went around to open the back door and patted him lightly. The man's eyes were closed and he reeked of alcohol. Jean Wan patted him again. No reaction. Was he really asleep? Jean Wan simply reached out to hold his arm and pulled him out of the car. When the man got out of the car, his entire weight fell on her. She held him with some difficulty, reached out to close the car door, and then staggered all the way into the elevator in the underground parking lot. She finally entered the elevator, but because of the man's height, length, and completely healthy body weight, she, a woman who weighed only about 90 kilograms, could not stand steadily. In the end, she could only lean against the wall of the elevator and bear the man's weight. The man's head hung on her shoulder, and his breath, which reeked of alcohol, brushed against her neck. After being pressed like this for a while, Jean poked her head out to look at the number on the elevator. She remembered that she hadn't swiped the elevator card or pressed the floor password, and the elevator was still on the basement floor. She hurriedly pushed him. "Let me press the password first." She pushed him for a long time but to no avail. In the end, she could only support him with one hand and reach out with the other. After barely pressing the password, she hurriedly withdrew her hand and tried to support the man's heavy and tall body. It was not until the elevator stopped on their floor that Jean forcibly pulled him out of the elevator. In the past, when Immerse carried her, he could easily carry her by the waist, but when she held him, it was as if she were carrying a stone. He was so heavy and so tall. She couldn't hold him at all. She finally opened the door and helped the man in. Jean staggered all the way to the sofa. Fearing that he would fall to the ground, she helped him to sit down on the sofa. Seeing the man leaning against the sofa, Jean raised her hand and rubbed her wrist, which was a little sore from supporting him just now. She turned to close the door, changed her shoes, went to the shoe cabinet, took out a pair of men's indoor slippers, and squatted down to help Immerse change his leather shoes. After working for a long time, she was covered in sweat. Jean face, which was a little pale because she hadn't recovered yet, was now faintly red. After putting on the shoes and turning on the air conditioner, she stood by the sofa, looked at the man leaning against the sofa motionless, and fell into deep thought. She had succeeded in bringing him back, then, what should she do now? When he was sober, he refused to talk to her. Now that he was so drunk, it was even more impossible for him to talk. At most, he could only be in front of her, where she could touch and see him. She couldn't touch this man all night while he was drunk just because she hadn't touched him for a long time, could she? As soon as this thought popped up in her mind, Jean lips twitched in disgust. Seeing the man leaning against the sofa with his eyes closed and rubbing between his eyebrows, she simply turned to look for the antidote. As she searched, she looked back at the sofa from time to time. Seeing that he had been sitting there and had no intention of getting up to leave, she lowered her head to continue searching. After finding the antidote, she went to boil water, washed the white towel with cold water, wrung it dry, and quickly walked back to the sofa to wipe his face. Chapter 386. As soon as she met Immerse's eyes, she clenched the towel and looked into his eyes. "Did you wake up just now?" Or, "I didn't wake up. What are you going to do to me after you brought me back?" The man's eyes were deep and quiet. "Or do you think you can solve any problem by bringing me back like this?" Of course, Jean understood that nothing could be solved. It was as if time had passed and the circumstances had changed. When she faced him, she couldn't feel hot at all. Instead, she felt cold all over. Today's Immerse was not only the CEO who once terrified the business world, but also the global CEO of Shine Group who shocked and frightened the entire Western financial world. Everything about him was buried under a calm and indifferent shrewdness. Jean looked at his face. It was still so handsome, but it was also stained with the coldness and nobility of a superior. It was a face that she missed very much, but when she looked at it, she instinctively felt a chill in her heart. For this man, in addition to missing him, she felt more like a stranger. He was clearly drunk, but his eyes were cold and sharp, like a cold knife cutting her flesh. Jean thought for a while and then asked, "When did you wake up? Or, were you not drunk at all?" The man sat on the sofa and didn't intend to get up, or maybe he was a little drunk and didn't intend to get up. He just looked at her and smiled, but his smile made her feel cold. He said slowly, if I wasn't drunk, how could I allow you to sit in the driver's seat? It's very simple that I drove you back. Shenmue said his girlfriend had a stomachache, which can be serious or minor. He was in a hurry to go back, so he gave me the key. Jinwan said calmly, I happened to be in that club and happened to not drink, so I drove you back. Mo Jingshan smiled, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. It seemed that he had seen through her purpose at a glance. His eyes were too cold and sharp. Jinwan seemed to have nowhere to hide in front of him. Even if what he did and refused to see her during this time aroused her resistance, she couldn't stand such treatment. If it were in the past, she would have jumped up and left. But Mo Jingshan had always been too good to her, and all his kindness made it impossible for her to be angry at him. Besides, she really missed him too much. But as soon as she met his eyes, Jinwan instinctively avoided his eyes and went into the kitchen. The water is boiling. I'll make you some hangover medicine. As he spoke, he quickly walked into the kitchen, picked up a glass, and poured some water. Then, he placed the medicine into the glass and shook it gently as if he couldn't feel how hot the glass was. He walked out with the glass and placed it on the coffee table. The man sat there and looked at her fingers that had been scalded red. He looked at the skin on the back of her hand that was slightly redder than before. Although there were still some scars from Cambodia, they were indeed much lighter than a few months ago. He looked at her silently and didn't speak, nor did Jinwan. They were silent for a long time. Jinwan pointed to the glass on the table. Drink some. Drink it while it's hot. The medicine will take effect faster. Shenmue said you drank a lot tonight, so you may have a stomachache or a headache. You'll feel better after drinking it. Mo Jingshan's face was expressionless as if he wasn't even interested in the glass of water she poured for him. Or perhaps, he was guarding against her. Against what? Was he afraid that she would drug him? Jinwan looked into his eyes. Do you hate me so much now? Obviously. She paused and asked calmly, when I was in the mall with Xia Tian, I saw you with Shuyan. Did you accompany her shopping? Or was there any other reason? The man narrowed his eyes at her words. What kind of answer do you want to hear? Jinwan's lips moved. In the past, Mo Jingshan was the person who hated misunderstandings between them the most. Whenever there was the slightest misunderstanding, he would immediately give her a reasonable explanation to set her mind at ease and not let her imagination run wild. She wanted to ask where the Mo Jingshan who had always firmly pressed against her heart had gone. But when the words reached her mouth, she suddenly couldn't bring them out. Under the man's cold gaze, Jinwan stood behind the coffee table for a long time and said, I can't understand whether your attitude toward me right now is disgust or wariness, or I don't know what else you mean, but from the beginning, I just wanted to live a good life. I didn't want to cling to anyone. You remember everything in the past, so you should know that my feelings for you and everything I've done are real. Just like how you used to treat me, it's all very pure. Before she finished speaking, she heard the man chuckle. It was the kind of cold, mocking chuckle that came from his chest. It was very light, but she heard it. The man stood up, walked around the coffee table and the cup of sobering tea on it, and walked up to her. The clear and clean smell of his body mixed with the smell of wine. Subconsciously, Jinwan felt all the pores on her body contract as he suddenly took the initiative to approach her. She raised her eyes to look at him. At the same time, the man leaned down to her, and his breath fell on the skin of her cheek. Pure. Don't you feel embarrassed saying this word to me? Jinwan raised her head to look at him and looked at him with a stubborn and serious expression that would not be overwhelmed by his aura. Of course I don't feel embarrassed. I just learned a lesson and learned how to cherish, how to avoid all harm, and how to live a good life. I can bear the word pure. It's the same for you, Mo Jingshan. My feelings for you are pure enough. It's fine if you don't believe me, but you can't completely deny me like this. She stared at him steadily. I can't easily give up on the man I once loved. A man who could even throw his life away for me. Right now, even if you directly stab a knife into my body, I won't say a single word. After all, the pain you've experienced is 1,000,000 times worse than mine. Marriage is mine, the man is mine, and the family is what I have to protect. You don't have the right to make me give up. Mo Jingshan raised her chin, his voice soft and slow. So stubborn? So affectionate? Jin Wan saw the thick mockery in his eyes. His gaze was as dark and deep as ever, and his voice was as gentle and mild as ever. However, she raised her eyes to look at his cold expression. Aside from coldness, she could not capture any other emotions. Chapter 387. Although Jin Wan wasn't seriously injured when she fell down the stairs in the Yew Garden yesterday, her forehead was a little red near her hairline. Other than a nude lipstick, she rarely used foundation, so the spot on her forehead was not covered. When she lowered her head and raised her head, the loose strands of hair fell back a little, revealing the red spot on her forehead. She held the glass in front of him and froze because of the man's gaze on her forehead. Neither of them spoke. The large space was so quiet that even the drop of a needle could be heard, but Jin Wan's heartbeat was strangely particularly loud. The man looked at her and said in a low voice, "Jin Wan, I never joke. Since you've mentioned divorce, you should break it off completely." He stood in front of her and didn't take the glass in her hand but just looked down at her indifferently. The light in the living room fell on the top of her head and seemed to cover her with a layer of light silver. He was cold and noble. Even though he reeked of alcohol, it didn't affect his handsomeness and charm at all. Mo Jingshan. He was Mo Jingshan. Jin Wan kept reminding herself that no matter how cruel and heartless he was to her now, from the moment he rushed out in that black Bentley to protect her behind his back, she couldn't lose her temper at him. Maybe it was just a broken dream. Or maybe it was just a reality and she saw the real him. Don't pester me anymore. I don't like pestering. He didn't raise his hand to take her glass from beginning to end. Seeing the man turn and leave without looking back, Jin Wan felt as though her entire body was filled with a sense of helplessness. Her heart was filled with a sense of obstruction. The moment she heard the door open, the glass in Jin Wan's hand fell to the ground. The man didn't look back but paused for a moment. Seeing him stand there without moving, and seeing him pause for a moment, Jin Wan turned and walked over. She stood behind him and stared at his back for a long time before she slowly raised her hand and carefully hugged him from behind. In the past, when she wanted to hug him, she had never been so careful. She couldn't see the man's deep eyes. She could only feel the man's cruel and merciless hands trying to pull her hands away from him. Jin Wan held him tightly. She didn't speak, nor did he. In silence, the two of them seemed to be fighting quietly. Her arms were entangled with his. But her strength was no match for his. He pulled her hand away and threw her back mercilessly. Jin Wan took a few steps back and hit the wine cabinet by the wall. The few bottles of wine inside fell out and broke all over the floor. Red, white, and various colors of wine mixed together and flowed to her feet. Jin Wan could not help but shiver as she felt the chill from beneath her feet. She looked at the ground and then up at the man in front of the door. His blood seemed to solidify in his body, slowly turning into ice at the same temperature as his blood. It was bone-chilling. Without a word, she suddenly bent down and stepped on the broken pieces on the floor to pick them up. Mo Jingshan turned his eyes to see Jin Wan stepping on the broken pieces barefoot. He said coldly without raising his eyelids, "Jin Wan, it's the stupidest thing to do to attract my attention by hurting yourself. The wounds on your feet won't move me. It will only make you unable to work for several days in a row. Not only will it delay your work, but it will also make me see your stupidity and boredom." Jin Wan squatted on the ground as if she didn't hear his words. She avoided the broken pieces, but she was still scratched. She moved aside and picked up the broken pieces. After picking up some of them, she said calmly, "I didn't hurt myself." "Really?" He looked at the small but obvious bloodstains at her feet. "Take care of yourself." With that, he walked out of the door. Hearing the door open and close, Jean Wan's hands were still mechanically and numbly picking up the broken pieces. When she stepped on the broken pieces, she didn't seem to feel any pain. She got up to get a mop and a broom and swept the broken pieces. When she turned around, she found that there was a long trail of blood on the ground. She simply threw the things in her hands to the corner and sat on the ground that still had a lot of fragments. She sat by the side and watched as a few bottles of wine fell to the ground with only half of the upper part broken, while the lower part of the wine was still in the bottle. Jean Wan picked up one of them. She didn't know what year it was, but she knew it couldn't be cheap since Mo Jingshan kept it at home. She avoided the broken bottle and raised her head to take a sip. It tasted strange and a little bitter. She picked up the other half of the bottle and poured it into her mouth in a way that avoided cutting her mouth. Tut, it was still bitter. She tasted several bottles in a row, but they were all bitter. She smacked her lips and licked the corner of her mouth, only to find that it was the bitter taste in her mouth. After wiping her mouth, she looked at the expensive wine on the ground and really couldn't bear to waste it. She didn't mind those spilled on the ground, but there was still some left at the bottom of the bottle. At least it was worth drinking. She took another sip. This time it was not so bitter, but it was a little astringent. She tasted another sip, and it tasted the same. The woman, who couldn't hold her liquor, sat on the ground with bare white and tender feet. She picked up one bottle after another and drank all the broken bottles. She narrowed her eyes, looked at the quiet closed door, couldn't see Mo Jingshan, and then looked back out of the window. Oh, so many stars. The black ghost sped on the road. Not long after Mo Jingshan left, he went to a nearby drugstore to buy medicine. When he got out of the car, he was about to hand the medicine to the security guard for Aolan International to send it up. However, the moment he got out of the car, he suddenly paused. He raised his eyes to see that on the balcony of the 18th floor, a woman in a skirt was sitting at the edge. Her two injured feet were swinging back and forth, and it seemed like a gust of wind could blow her down from the 18th floor. Mo Jingshan's expression darkened. He abruptly slammed the car door shut and picked up his phone to call Jean Wan. The woman was still on the balcony, unmoving. He didn't know if the phone was placed inside or held in her hand. It rang for a long time before he finally picked it up. The moment the phone was picked up, Mo Jingshan's voice was cold. Jean Wan, what are you doing? The woman's voice came through the phone in a daze. Me? What am I doing? I'm looking at the stars. Mo Jingshan raised his eyes to look at the balcony of the 18th floor. The woman's legs were still swinging back and forth, and one hand was raised to her ear as she answered the phone. Chapter 388. It's been raining for days. Now the sky is dark and there's nothing. Why are you looking at the stars? Nothing. But I see a lot of stars. With that, the woman on the balcony began to swing her legs back and forth again. Mo Jingshan raised his eyebrows. For a moment, he wondered if this woman had drunk all the wine in the bottles that had fallen on the ground. The door was suddenly opened, and the wind from the door to the open floor-to-ceiling windows fluttered the curtains, fluttering them in the air. The wind also ruffled the woman's skirt and hair on the balcony. Mo Jingshan glanced at the shallow bloodstains and the completely empty broken bottles on the ground, walked in, and saw where Jean Wan was sitting on the balcony. Jean Wan, come down. Jean Wan looked back at him and grinned at him with an intoxicated expression. Why are you back? Didn't you leave? Seeing her turn her head, Mo Jingshan frowned. I asked you to come down, not to move. I'm fine here. It's safe. Jean Wan lowered her head to look at where she was sitting and then muttered, Your wine is really terrible. I didn't know that the wine in your cabinet was worse than the one before. But they must be very expensive, and I couldn't bear to spend them, so I drank all that I could. Hey, guess what? After drinking it, I actually saw stars. As she spoke, she lowered her head and then proudly crossed her legs on the balcony. Seeing that she actually had the courage to cross her legs, the coldness in Enchanting's eyes rose. Don't move. Jean Wan looked at him in confusion. What? Do you also want to see the stars? With that, she suddenly moved her butt to the side. Well, I'll make room for you. Come and see together. Enchanting didn't say a word, abruptly dropped the medicine in his hand, strode over, and grabbed the arm of the woman who was swaying on the balcony. Jean Wan was startled by his action and was about to withdraw her hand instinctively when she felt a weight on her shoulder and was carried down from the edge of the balcony by him. The moment her feet landed on the ground, she almost lost her balance and staggered in his arms. She instinctively grabbed his shirt and climbed up, then leaned into his arms, saying in confusion, Enchanting, why are you back? No. I should say, are you back? The man did not speak but pulled her into the window from the balcony. He slammed the window shut and was about to push her away when the woman suddenly wrapped her arms around his neck. The smell of alcohol was thicker than his face. She whispered softly by his ear, are you back? Enchanting, you've only just woken up, aren't you? You're back, aren't you? Enchanting pushed her to the sofa, and when she was about to get up and throw herself at him again, he said indifferently, sit down. Jean Wan paused and sat down obediently on the sofa under his cold gaze. The man coldly glanced at her, picked up the broom she had thrown on the ground, swept up the broken pieces, and threw them away. Then he saw the shallow bloodstains on the ground, walked over, and saw that there were some fine glass shards on the soles of Jean Wan's feet, and the dust and blood on the ground were stuck to her feet. Seeing the man come over, Jean Wan didn't speak, but was suddenly picked up by the man like a chick and brought into the bathroom. Enchanting, what are you doing? She looked at him in confusion. After entering the bathroom, Enchanting was about to ask her to sit on the toilet lid so that he could help her wash her feet, but the woman was not obedient and moved her hands and feet. Seeing that she was completely drunk, the man suddenly turned on the shower head above, turned the water to the maximum, and poured it on her head and body. Jean Wan curled up on the toilet and shivered all over. Her whole body was washed by the cold water, and the shock and coldness made her mind clear for a moment. She raised her eyes, wiped the water off her face, and struggled to get up, but the man still pressed her firmly on the toilet and washed her from head to toe with cold water. What are you doing? Jean Wan couldn't speak. As soon as she spoke, water would come into her mouth. Afraid that she would choke, she could only try to turn her head away. Finally, the sound of water stopped. Then the man's voice, colder than the cold water just now, hit her, awake? Jean Wan sat stiffly on the toilet for a long time and did wake up. She turned to look at the man, whose black shirt and trousers were also splashed by the water, but he was clearly not as disheveled as she was. He looked at her coldly. In order to make me stay, you really spared no effort. Jean Wan was stunned for a long time before she recalled the scene when she climbed onto the balcony to look at the stars. Just now, there really were no stars. She just drank the mixed wine, and then her eyes were full of stars. Her feet hurt a little, so she walked to the window and opened it. She wanted to see if Enchanting had left, but she didn't know what she was thinking at that time. She actually climbed up and sat there to look at the sky. Her lips, which were pale from the cold water, moved. She raised her head to look at the man's indifferent eyes and said hoarsely, why did you come back? If you jump from the 18th floor, your blood will splatter on the spot, and the surrounding companies will be affected. Not only will you use your own life to affect the feng shui of High City, but it will also be bad luck for me to go from being divorced to being widowed. Jean Wan's rationality, which had been eroded by alcohol, was instantly pricked by his voice, and her nerves trembled. The man stared at her quietly with his deep, dark eyes. His tone was not heavy, and it was as though he was casually stating an unimportant matter. It's even more stupid to fall to your death from the 18th floor because you're drunk. Don't do such things that will implicate others. Live well. Don't add to anyone's burden. Enchanting threw the towel on her head and turned to walk out without any reluctance. Jean Wan tugged the towel off her head and looked at the man's cold and resolute back. Mo Jingshan, am I a burden to you? The man's long figure paused for a moment. He did not answer, and his back was cold as though he had really pulled out of her world and would never enter again. Jean Wan's eyelids drooped, and her eyes were half closed. Then, she slowly stood up with some difficulty. Her long hair wrapped around her shoulders like seaweed, and her white dress was translucent and stuck to her body because it was drenched. She looked like a seductive water demon. Chapter 389. Jean Wan put one hand against the door and raised the other to grab the man's sleeve. She turned her head and looked up at the man's indifferent eyes. Say it, Mo Jingshan. The man's brows were full of indifference. He looked at her calmly and did not answer. Say it. Jean Wan slowly steadied herself in front of the door and held the door tightly with both hands behind her. Say something even more ruthless and cruel. Let me give up completely. Say it. What else can you do if you don't give up? Looking at the redness brewing in her eyes, Mo Jingshan's eyes deepened inch by inch, and his lips curved in a cold and heartless smile. What kind of night do you want to make with the little bit of alcohol in your body and the little bit of alcohol in mine? Or do you think you are charming enough to make me repeat the same mistake with you? As the man spoke, he skillfully pinched her chin with his slender and well-defined fingers, not forcing her to open the door. At the moment when Jean Wan was startled, he leaned over without warning, pressed her against the door, bent his head dangerously and ambiguously to her lips, and chuckled hoarsely and indifferently. Why don't you say it directly? What do you want? Jean Wan instinctively raised her hand to push him away, but as soon as she raised it, he abruptly held her wrist. His cool and pleasant masculine scent enveloped her, and his breath brushed against her lips. If you want it, just say it. It's just a matter between a man and a woman. Just say it. After all, we've slept together so many times. I'm not so heartless that I won't reject you even if you send yourself to my door. If you say you're lonely, I can understand you. The man's voice was low and indifferent. To be precise, he completely trampled on her self-esteem. Jean Wan was so angry that her tears almost fell. Did he deliberately want to shatter his image and all the good things he had in her heart? Feeling the man's head approaching, Jean Wan subconsciously turned her head away, but he held her chin and turned her face back. When she was about to say that she didn't mean that, the man had firmly imprisoned her, bent down, and accurately landed on her lips. Her lips were covered with the familiar softness. When Jean Wan reacted, the man had pried open her lips and tongue and plunged deep into her mouth. No. Jean Wan struggled hard, but he firmly pressed her arms against the door and she could not move at all. She instinctively raised her legs, but at the same time, the man held her down and she could not move at all. Mo Jingshan, you, ugh. Jean Wan desperately turned her head away, but the man seemed to be deliberately kissing her fiercely. Again and again, he entangled himself in her mouth in a way that made her feel extremely uncomfortable and almost unable to breathe. Jean Wan didn't know how long it had been since he last touched or kissed her. She only felt that under the entanglement of such a deep and heavy kiss, all her senses and nerves were trembling violently. Even her heart was beating violently. When the tip of her tongue was lifted, the man's merciless kiss slightly slowed down because of her uncontrollable tears falling into their mouths. For a moment, it seemed that the familiar Mo Jingshan was kissing her, kissing away the salty taste in her mouth, kissing away the wetness in the corner of her mouth, and was about to kiss away the tears on her face, when he paused for a moment. He held the back of her head and looked at her quietly with his deep, bottomless, black eyes. He watched the woman lean against the door like a dying fish and breathe heavily because of the kiss a moment ago. Her eyes were red and full of tears. He was silent for a moment, and his eyes were so deep that she could not see through them. He slowly curved his lips. Is this what you want? Jean Wan's brain trembled. The familiar gentleness at that moment almost confused her, but when the man spoke again, she instinctively tried to push him away. However, the man quickly took her into his arms, pressed her against the door, and held her firmly in his arms. The kiss that fell on her again was even more fierce and deep than before. Jean Wan pushed him away in vain, but it had no effect except to make the man hold her more tightly. Her breath seemed to be cruelly robbed, and she fell limp in his arms because it was difficult to breathe. Mo Jingshan finally let go of her and withdrew from her lips. Jean Wan's pale face had turned red, and her mouth was full of the man's refreshing taste. She leaned against the door softly and almost slipped down. Her hand weakly held on to the door handle to steady herself. She didn't even have the strength to raise her head to see the expression on his face. She could only hear his cold words falling on her head. "Do you want more? I don't mind fulfilling your wish here tonight." Mo Jingshan's voice was full of condescending mockery. "Since you still refuse to divorce, from a legal point of view, it seems that I can indeed perform this kind of husband and wife duty a few more times before the divorce. I think you must miss it very much." Jean Wan couldn't care about anything else. She leaned against the door, lowered her head, and panted. Her fingers clenched the door handle, motionless. The moment she heard the man's cold smile and asked, "Do you want to continue?" she suddenly let go of the door handle, raised her hand, and was about to slap him in the face. He didn't intend to stop her. He just stood motionless in front of her and looked at her. However, her hands still didn't fall but froze in the air. Looking at the man's cold expression, the image of the black Bentley that was smashed in front of her on the Los Angeles freeway that day flashed in front of her. Jean Wan's hand froze in the air. Then she slowly put down her hand, clenched her fists, and her nails dug deep into her palms. "Mo Jingshan, even if I left a bad impression on you, you can't forget all the feelings we have had for each other for so long. Do you really feel good about being so cruel and heartless to me?" His lips curled into a cold and piercing smile. He looked at her with a deep and shallow gaze. She couldn't tell which of his words were true and which were false. His voice was indifferent. "To be honest, even if you really jump off the balcony from where you are standing right now, I won't feel anything. Why would I feel good or bad?" Jean Wan's hand loosened and tightened and loosened again, and finally leaned against the door. She lowered her eyes to look at her bare feet, closed her eyes, and then forced a smile. No one knew who she was smiling at. She struggled to twist the door handle behind her, and when the door was opened, she picked up the bag on the shoe cabinet by the door, turned around, and walked out, despite the fact that her body and head were still wet. Chapter 390. Jean Wan completely ignored the man's voice behind her and didn't answer. She walked straight out, went to the elevator, pressed the down button, and stood there silently waiting for the elevator. Mo Jingshan came out and put a bath towel on her deadpan. "You're all wet. Go in and take a bath. Don't wander around." Jean Wan waved the bath towel off her back and said indifferently, "No, this is your place. I shouldn't have come." The man looked at her as if her heart had been hollowed out and didn't speak for a while. At the moment the elevator door opened, Jean Wan walked straight in. She had forgotten where she had taken off her shoes when she hurriedly helped him into the house. Anyway, it made no difference whether she wore shoes or not. She walked in barefoot, no longer looking at the man's face, and after counting to 1, the elevator door slowly closed in front of her. Suddenly, the elevator door opened again, and the man stood outside with a cold face, his hand on the button outside the door. When the door was about to close again, he walked in. Jean Wan stood against the wall of the elevator and looked at him expressionlessly. "What are you doing? How can you walk like this? Go back with me." The man's face was still cold, but his hand had come over to grab her arm and take her out of the elevator. Jean Wan didn't have the strength to break free, and her lips still felt numb. When he reopened the door and brought her back inside, she looked at the familiar space in front of her and said calmly and soberly, "After all, this is your place. As long as I am here, you will definitely leave. I can't always occupy your place. I am a woman who is no longer important to you. When it's time to be self-conscious, I have to be self-conscious and return this place to you." The man ignored her words, put the bath towel on her again, and said coldly with a hint of sternness in his voice. Go take a bath. I'll go back to the yew garden to take a bath. Don't make me say it again. Jean Wan stood still, but her heart was cold all over. Or do you want me to take a bath for you? Hearing this, she paused. Her hand clutched her bag, and after a long time, she turned around and walked out, not wanting to say another word. However, before she stepped out of the door, her arm was abruptly pulled back. Before she could steady herself, Mo Jingshan dragged her into the bathroom. When Jean Wan was about to push him away, he raised his hand and grasped her wrist, making it impossible for her to escape. He said dangerously and threateningly, I'll give you one last chance. Wash yourself, or I'll tear your clothes off right now. Mo Jingshan. Her voice was sullen and hoarse. The man was indifferent. His hands were already about to tear her clothes. No. Jean Wan hurriedly raised her hand to press against her clothes, using her bent elbow to push him away. Are you going to wash or not? This seemed to be his last warning. Jean Wan was indeed very cold. She had caught a cold these days, and she had even taken a cold shower earlier. She was cold from the inside out. Her teeth were chattering. She didn't know if it was because of the cold or because she was afraid. Only now did she realize that there would actually be a day when she would be afraid of Mo Jingshan. Earlier, when he kissed her, he did not hold back. If he really took off her clothes like this, or if something really happened here tonight, she suspected that she might lose half her life. When he was gentle to her, his strength was enough to make her unable to get out of bed. If he were to touch her under such circumstances, who knew what would happen to her? I'll wash myself. She held on to her clothes. He stepped back, walked around the water stains on the floor, and walked out of the bathroom again. He only threw down a cold sentence, 15 minutes. If you don't come out, I'll come in. Jean Wan looked at his back and then at the bathtub by the side. He forced her to come back to take a hot shower, but only gave her 15 minutes to take a shower. She turned to close the bathroom door and then took off her wet and sticky clothes. She only had 15 minutes to take a shower, and there was no time to soak in the bathtub. She picked up the shower head that Mo Jingshan had thrown aside, turned on the hot water, and washed herself well. She washed herself from head to toe. She didn't know how long it had been. It should be almost 15 minutes. She turned off the water, put on the bathtub, and went out. After all, she had lived in Aolan International before, so there were many of her clothes in the bedroom closet. She was about to enter the bedroom to change when she suddenly heard Mo Jingshan throw 2 boxes of medicine on the coffee table. Take the antipyretics before going to bed. Even if the injury on your foot is not serious, apply some medicine. Don't get yourself covered in scars. Jean Wan turned to see the medicine he had placed on the coffee table. She had only caught a cold, and her fever was not serious. Earlier, did he feel an unusual heat on her body? He was very familiar with her body and could even detect the slightest abnormality. But right now, she was completely unfamiliar with him, even a stranger. She did not speak and went into the bedroom to change. When she came out, Mo Jingshan had already disappeared. Jean Wan thought that he had found his conscience for a moment, or had recovered his usual patience and gentleness, telling her to take a shower, eat, and take the medicine. But it turned out that he was no longer accompanying her but leaving. In such a large apartment, every room was particularly empty and quiet. She walked to the sofa and sat down. She picked up the medicine box and opened it. She dug out a pill of antipyretics and put it in her mouth. She turned to see the medicine on the sofa. It did not look like the medicine in the medicine box but seemed to be newly bought. She stared at it for a long time before picking it up. Earlier, did Mo Jingshan go out to buy medicine for her because her foot was scratched by the shrapnel? She narrowed her eyes. This man who clearly seemed to want to push her away but still seemed to want to control her, what exactly did he mean? Jean Wan placed the medicine down and calculated that Mo Jingshan had only gone down for a few minutes. It would take at least 2 minutes for the elevator to go down from the 18th floor. She hesitated, stood up, and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. She opened the windows and stepped onto the balcony again, looking down. The black ghost was parked there. The car lights were already on, indicating that the man had gotten into the car but did not drive away. Jean Wan stared at the car below. She stood on the balcony and watched for more than 10 minutes, but the car really did not leave. Was he afraid that she would climb onto the balcony again to court death? If she really climbed onto the balcony, the most dangerous position, would he come up again? Jean Wan's hand gently stroked the edge of the balcony railing. She laughed at her own shameful and ridiculous thoughts. Chapter 391. Jean Wan left the balcony, closed the window, and returned to the sofa. She picked up the medicine to apply to the wound under her foot while looking at her cell phone. After applying the medicine, she picked up her cell phone and sent a text message to Mo Jingshan. "I'm sleeping. Good night." After sending the message, after a while, when the medicine under her foot was dry, she got up and went to the balcony again. When she looked down, the car had already left. Jean Wan raised her eyes to look at the heavy traffic on the long street in the distance. He cared about her life and death, but he refused to have feelings for her. Interesting. Really interesting. Since you want me to live well so much. Then Mo Jingshan, from today on, I will live a nourishing and exciting life, so exciting that you can't even avoid it. You can see my shadow everywhere. High City in summer was hot enough. Mo Nwan's studio was about to move to a new location. The office building had been built, and some of the internal offices needed to be cleaned up. It would probably be completed in more than a week. Jean Wan, wearing a loose white printed t-shirt and casual shorts, was busy in the office with the tools for painting the wall in her hand. Xia Tian had just returned from buying a dozen popsicles and saw that the others who had come in to clean up the office had gone to bed, but Jean Wan was still working hard. You really don't think of yourself as a boss. So many of your employees have sat down to rest. Why are you still painting there alone? Didn't the renovation workers say that these places will be blocked by glass? It's useless to paint them white. Anyway, they can't see them. Xia Tian went over and took out a popsicle from the bag and handed it to her. It's so hot. The building hasn't been connected to electricity, and the air conditioner isn't working. I'm sweating all over. Come and cool down. Jean Wan painted the last part of the office white, put down the tools in her hand, raised her hand to wipe the sweat on her face, and a piece of white paste on her hand rubbed against her cheek. There was not only white on her face, but also on her nose, chin, and neck. Xia Tian held back her laughter and handed her the popsicle. Eat it first. Remember to wash your face later. Jean Wan looked at her in confusion, tore open the bag of popsicles and said, "Why are you laughing? Have you never seen such a beautiful boss? I've never seen a boss who looks like he's possessed by a fierce bull. What's wrong with you this week? Some time ago, you were dispirited and listless, but recently, you're full of motivation. You even work so hard. I don't think you need to work out recently. You just need to accompany the group of workers in this building to decorate and paint the walls." Jean Wan took the wet towel from Xiao Ba and wiped her hands. Then she took a bite of the popsicle and turned to look at the wall in the office. I don't plan to put glass there anymore. I plan to put something else. It's more comfortable to paint it in the same color. Xia Tian raised her eyebrows and glanced at the white patches on her face. When I went out just now, I met Vince in a nearby cafe. He is the one who has been sending you flowers. He knows that you are here and said that he will treat us to iced coffee in a while. He specially invited you. Will you go with him? Jean Wan was expressionless. Didn't I tell you to tell him not to send me flowers in the future? You know what I mean. Why did you still agree to his invitation? Xia Tian spread out her hands. Boss Missouri has been hard to find recently. I have to find a second love for you. As the best bestie in the world, don't you understand my good intentions? Jean Wan rolled her eyes. I think you're tired of my peaceful life and want to stir up some trouble for me. I'm not interested in that Mr. Vince. If he wants to cooperate with me on a new project, I can meet him. But don't talk about anything else. Do you have to be so principled? You have principles, but that doesn't mean your husband has them. This morning, I saw a business magazine taking a photo of Mo Jingshan at an exhibition. Several of High City's socialites also attended the exhibition. As Xia Tian spoke, she looked at Jean Wan seriously. Those socialites are still eyeing him covetously. They won't miss a single exhibition. They all stand behind him and ask to take a photo with him. And look at you. Every day, you dress up like a decorator. Even I feel embarrassed to say that you're Mrs. Mo. Jean Wan nibbled the popsicle seriously and said carelessly, I also received the invitation to the exhibition, but I didn't attend it. So what if you were photographed standing with them? Did you see them kissing or hugging? When did you become so open-minded? Xia Tian looked at her incredulously and raised her hand to touch her head. A while ago, I thought you would collapse at any time like Lin Dayu, but it seems that you don't look like that recently. Jean Wan slapped her hand away, raised her hand to touch her head, and casually explained, I just feel that some things are not what they seem on the surface. Life has to go on. I can't keep living in depression and making my life a mess. Xia Tian sneered. That's so profound. I don't understand. Big sister, can you explain it a little more simply? Jean Wan bit the popsicle and said vaguely, I can only say that I'm more persevering and fighting. Xia Tian chuckled and wanted to touch her head again to see if she really had a fever. However, after eating the popsicle, Jean Wan picked up the tools, turned back to the office, climbed up the high stool nimbly, and continued to paint the wall. Xiao Ba leaned over to Xia Tian and whispered, Sister Xia, who provoked boss? Xia Tian shook her head. I don't know. I think maybe he was really provoked. With that, Xia Tian was about to step forward to help Jean Wan when she saw a business magazine on the high stool Jean Wan was stepping on. The cover of the magazine was the one in which Mo Jingshan and those love-struck ladies were photographed in the same frame, but this magazine was being stepped on by Jean Wan as a footrest. Xia Tian, Jean Wan was busy in the new office building for 2 days. Xia Tian persuaded her to go back, but she ignored her. Her cell phone was left here without charging and was turned off for 2 days. When she left the building and was about to go back to the studio, she charged her cell phone in the car and turned it on. As she expected, she saw a large number of messages and missed calls pouring in. If her partners couldn't reach her, they would naturally call other people in the studio. Most of the missed calls were from the Mo family. They were from the Mo family. Then there were calls from the Yu Garden and Auntie Chin. Chapter 392. My great aunt, there's finally news of you. As soon as she received Jean Wan's call, Auntie Chin hurriedly sighed and said, Grandfather Mo called you all day yesterday, but he couldn't find you. Last night, he came to the Yu Garden, only to find that you and Mr. Mo were not there. We didn't dare to say much and just said that you and Mr. Mo were very busy recently, but Grandfather Mo must have found something wrong between you and Mr. Mo, so he left angrily. Today, he went back to the Mo family, but he asked me to contact you and tell you to go back to him immediately. When Jean Wan saw so many calls earlier, she guessed that it must be related to Elder Mo. Hearing this, she felt even more guilty. After returning from America, she and Mo Jingshan had not returned to the Mo family. My studio is going to move, so I've been busy here and didn't have time to care about home. Mr. Mo hasn't returned to the Yu Garden recently. I didn't dare to tell Elder Mo about this, but it's not good to keep it a secret. Madam, you should go back to the Mo family. Elder Mo didn't find you, and he didn't even get through to Mr. Mo's phone. Elder Mo is really angry. Jean Wan immediately looked at the time. I'll take some time to go to the Mo family in the afternoon. Did grandfather say anything before he left? He didn't say anything. He only asked you to return to the Mo family. All right, I understand. For so long, grandfather Mo had doted on her the most and spoiled her the most. After returning to China, she hadn't visited the Mo family. It wasn't that she didn't miss grandfather Mo, but that Mo Jingshan hadn't returned, and she couldn't go back to the Mo family by herself. In the past, they were always together, and now they were alone. It would definitely arouse suspicion. After all, the Mo family didn't only have grandfather Mo, there were also his relatives who often visited the Mo family. In order not to make Elder Mo angry for too long, Jean Wan returned to the studio to tidy up, changed her clothes, and drove to the Mo family. It took her an hour to go from Jean Lin building to the Mo family's old mansion. When she arrived, Jean Wan called Auntie Chen to reassure her. After getting out of the car, Jean Wan found that grandfather Mo had been waiting for her in the front yard. Jean Wan put on a big smile and walked in with the boxes of tonics she had specially bought on the way. Elder Mo saw that she was alone and immediately walked out. He looked her up and down several times before glancing behind her. His face was filled with dissatisfaction and unhappiness as he asked in a heavy voice, "Why didn't Jingshan come back with you? Mo Group is about to merge with Shine. He has a lot of things to do and can't leave. I just finished my work and saw so many calls on my phone, so I hurried back to see you." As Jean Wan spoke, she stepped forward and held on to Elder Mo's arm with a smile. "Grandfather, people of our age are all busy. You have to understand. When you were young, you must have worked harder than us. If we don't work hard when we're young, how can we live out our remaining years as leisurely as you?" Elder Mo harumphed. "Don't talk to me like you're stirring honey. Last night, when I went to the Mo family, you and Jingshan weren't there. I asked Xiao Chen, and she only said that you've been busy recently. Fine, you can be busy, but you've been so busy that you haven't even come back to see this old man for several months. I'm just getting old and have one foot in the coffin, but it's not like I'm lying in it entirely. Did you have to forget this old man so early? You're destined to live for more than 100 years. Although you're angry, don't randomly curse yourself. Auntie Chen is right. We're just too busy." Jean Wan's face was full of smiles. Elder Mo snorted and stopped talking nonsense with her. After dragging Jean Wan into the front hall, the servant came in with tea, and Elder Mo still sat down without a smile. Jean Wan handed the tonic in her hand to the servant, looked around, and found that Uncle O, the butler she often saw before, was not here. She asked curiously, "Where is Uncle O? Why don't I see him? He fell and hurt his leg." "He won't come back until 2 months later," Elder Mo said grumpily. Elder Mo grumpily said, "Now that he's injured, there's no one at home to play chess with me. You and Jingshan went out for so long, and now that you're finally back, you didn't even mention to visit me at the Mo home." Seeing Elder Mo grumbling like an old child who didn't get candy, Jean Wan held back her laughter, squatted by his leg, and eagerly massaged his leg, saying, "It's all our fault. In the future, even if Jingshan is too busy to come back, I'll definitely come back to accompany you." "Humph," Elder Mo harumphed again and turned his head away. This time, the old man had an unhappy expression on his face. Jean Wan continued to massage his leg. "All right, Grandpa, don't be angry. I know I'm wrong. I'll think of you every day." After being coaxed by her for a long time, Elder Mo relaxed and looked down at Jean Wan, whose eyes were curved with a smile. "Is there any problem between you and Jingshan?" Jean Wan forced a smile. "What problem can we have?" Elder Mo looked at her steadily, reached out to press Jean Wan's hand that had been hammering his leg, and patted the back of her hand with his wrinkled hand. "Child, if you've been wronged, you must tell me." "I know. I'll tell you if there's anything. Don't worry. We're fine. Did you spend the New Year's Eve with Xiao Zhe when you were in Los Angeles a few months ago?" Yes. You've met Jingshan's mother?" I've met her. She's a very good person and treats me very well. Grandpa, you really don't have to worry about us. No matter where you are, we're fine. As long as you're healthy, it's fine. As Jean Wan spoke, she removed her hand and raised her head to look at him. Grandpa, you've heard of the saying, having an elder at home is like having a treasure. You're our treasure. No one dares to forget you. Elder Mo watched as Jean Wan raised her head to look at him like an adorable little deer. He smiled and reached out to pat her head. As expected, my granddaughter-in-law is the most considerate. It's said that girls are like little cotton-padded jackets. If you and Jing Shen can quickly give me a granddaughter, I'll probably be happy to live for another 20 to 30 years. Then you can accompany us for another few decades. With an old treasure like you at home, others can only be envious. Elder Mo's mood was greatly improved by her words. He picked up the tea and took a sip. He had Jean Wan stop squatting and quickly sit down. Chapter 393. Grandfather Mo snorted. During the new year, these people did come, but I drove them away. Why did you drive them away? It'll be more lively with these people at home. Nonsense. They're all glib-tongued and don't speak a word of truth. When they see me, they fight with each other openly and covertly. I'm not their grandfather or father. I'm just Mo. If they want a piece of my pie, they have to ask me if I agree. They come here all day to flatter me. They might as well deal with their own family affairs. They have no ability at all. They've learned to cling to the Mo family's thigh since they were young. I'm too lazy to entertain them anymore. With that, Grandfather Mo suddenly remembered something. By the way, during the new year, there's one more thing. I have an old friend in South Africa whose family runs a jewelry business. Not long ago, they discovered the world's largest and most complete 10-carat blue diamond. At that time, you and Jingshan were in Los Angeles. Because Jingshan had talked to South Africa before, I knew he wanted to give you a unique gift, so I left the blue diamond for Jingshan. It's in your room. Wait a minute. I'll bring it out for you. Jean Wan paused and hurriedly got up to follow him. Grandfather Mo had gone out of the front hall and excitedly asked the servants to help him upstairs to fetch it. Not long after, Grandfather Mo came back with a velvet box and handed it to Jean Wan. Come on, open it. Jean Wan still looked at Grandfather Mo in surprise and then at the envious servants around her. After thinking for a while, she opened the box. The blue diamond in the box was very big. It shone brightly under the light of the front hall and was incredibly beautiful. And it was really a very complete round blue diamond. It was not deliberately designed to be a water drop, a heart, or any other popular shape. It was a complete round, but it was the most valuable and complete diamond shape among the blue diamonds. Jean Wan didn't know much about jewelry, but she knew that blue diamonds were very rare and more expensive than any diamond in the world, not to mention such a pure and complete round blue diamond. Such a diamond was worth at least hundreds of millions. Grandpa, this is too expensive. Jean Wan was about to quickly put the box back on the table when the old man glared at her. He glared at her until she withdrew her hand. It doesn't matter if it's expensive or not. It's not like the Mo family can't afford it. Besides, I didn't reserve this blue diamond. Jingshan had long noticed that you rarely wore rings after you got married. Those big and small wedding rings were too restrictive. Perhaps you wouldn't like them. He had intended to give this blue diamond to you a long time ago, but he had been waiting for the rarest and most complete one. Now that he had finally found one, how could he not give it to you? A few months ago, you weren't in Haicheng. When they delivered the blue diamond, I accepted it on your behalf. You can take it as a gift from the Mo family. It's a token of my sincerity, and it's also a token of Jingshan's sincerity. My best granddaughter-in-law deserves the best diamond. Hearing that it was something Mo Jingshan had ordered a long time ago, Jean Wan's hand paused. It's fine if you don't like the wedding ring, but this blue diamond was personally ordered by Jingshan. You can't possibly refuse it. The old man smiled as he spoke. This is a blue diamond that hasn't been processed. If you think it's too big and can't find an occasion to wear it, you can just put it away. Isn't it said that women need more jewelry to have a sense of security? You silly girl, you don't even want the jewels and diamonds I gave you. Grandpa, the Mo family is my safest haven. Why would I need these worldly possessions to find a sense of security? But this is really too expensive. Jean Wan opened the box and glanced at it. Such a big one. The price of it is probably enough to open several companies in Haicheng. Elder Mo smiled until his eyes narrowed. You're quite knowledgeable. Anyway, the Mo family doesn't lack money. Since I'm giving it to you, I'm giving it to you. If you really don't want it, go talk to Jingshan and see if he can help you turn this diamond into a few companies for you to play with. Jean Wan heard the teasing in his words and immediately became embarrassed. Grandpa, I'm very serious about my studio. No matter if it's the studio or the company, I can't just play around. I know. It's just that you, this child, could have stayed at home and lived a comfortable life as a rich wife, but you insisted on opening a studio and even took on so many contracts. How good do you think it is in the business world? Aren't you the one who has to suffer? At first, I thought you were just playing around. Later, I found that you were indeed too serious. But why do you have to work so hard? Jean Wan smiled and did not explain further. It was already very late when she left the Mo family. Jean Wan drove past the Mo Corporation and stopped for a while in the square opposite. She raised her eyes to look at the floor-to-ceiling windows on the top floor of the Mo Corporation. From here, she could accurately find the location of Mo Jingshan's CEO office. She could also see the lights in his office. Looking in the direction of the light, she reached out to pick up the velvet box on the passenger seat, opened it, and saw the round blue diamond that still shone brightly in the dark car. Such a perfect circle seemed to be a route that could never be taken wrong. After all, it was a circle. No matter which angle it went, which side it went, it would eventually return to the starting point and would never deviate from the original route. Such a perfect shape, in her hand, was repeatedly rubbed by her fingers. After lingering outside the Mo Corporation for a long time, Jean Wan finally got out of the car. It was already late. Most of the staff in the Mo Corporation building had gotten off work, and some were working overtime. There were several offices on each floor with lights on. Jean Wan went to the top floor. Shenmu guessed that at this time, he had also gotten off work. The office on the top floor was very quiet, and there were few people in the secretary's office and assistant's office. Only a man in his 30s with glasses came out of the water closet. When he saw Jean Wan, he froze for a moment and then asked Jean Wan respectfully and politely, "Are you Mrs. Mo?" Jean Wan gave him a strange look. "Do you know me?" "Hello, I'm the secretary-manager of CEO Mo. My surname is Ku." The man said to her with a smile, "When I was hired as the secretary, Special Assistant Shen showed me your photo. He said that if you came to the company, there was no need to make an appointment or inform us. You could come in directly." Chapter 394. Secretary Ku pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose very seriously. It's not easy to be a secretary in these multinational companies. The workload is so heavy, and there are more and more male secretaries. Besides, there are both men and women in the secretarial office. The more detailed work is done by the female secretaries, and the more complicated work, such as CEO Mo's frequent business trips, is handled by a male secretary like me. The division of labor is very clear. Jean Wan smiled because of his words. In fact, she was not surprised by the male secretary. Of course, she knew that there were many male secretaries now, and this position could be held by both men and women. Sometimes, men could do more things than women, and of course, the workload was also greater. She was surprised that the position of secretary manager had been vacant for so long, but in the end, he chose a male secretary. She used to be jealous, wondering if he would have another beautiful female secretary by his side, but in the end, it was actually, Mrs. Mo, are you here to see CEO Mo? He is in the office. You can go directly to him, Secretary Ku said as he poured water in the water room. I'm not in a hurry. What are you doing? CEO Mo discussed several projects with Shine in the United States last night. After all, there is a time difference between China and the United States. He was busy all night and didn't rest during the day. Now he has to continue a conference with the United States. I'm afraid he can't stand it, so I want to make a cup of coffee for him. Secretary Ku looked around as he spoke. But I don't seem to find any good coffee. Jean Wan looked at the cup in his hand and said with a faint smile, don't you know that CEO Mo seldom drinks coffee? I don't think so. President Mo has been drinking coffee a lot recently. He doesn't sleep much at night. When he's busy, he relies on coffee to pass his days. Sometimes I'm afraid that his body can't take it. But President Mo does drink a lot of coffee recently. I guess the bag of coffee that Special Assistant Shin bought has been emptied. Now the coffee in the hot water room is left here by other secretaries, not President Mo's. I don't know if he can get used to it. The smile in Jean Wan's eyes faded. You often drink coffee recently? Secretary Ku nodded and finally found the bag of imported coffee. He picked it up and looked inside. It's empty. With that, he handed the bag to Jean Wan. This bag is enough for 2 months. CEO Mo drank it up in less than a month. Jean Wan glanced at the bag and did not speak for a moment. Then she took the bag and said, if there's nothing else, you can go home. I'll take care of the coffee. Secretary Kun knew that she was Mrs. Mo, so she didn't ask much. In that case, I'll have to trouble you, Mrs. Mo. I'll go back to the office to work for a while. CEO Mo's workload has been very heavy recently. If possible, please persuade him not to work day and night without caring about his health. No matter how young and healthy he is, he can't work like this. Got it. After Secretary Ku left, Jean Wan stood in front of the water closet for a while, threw away the coffee bag in her hand, and turned to enter the elevator. She went to a porridge shop downstairs to buy a bowl of red date glutinous rice porridge and took it upstairs. When she reached the top floor, she saw that Secretary Ku was still there, so she handed the porridge to him. Take this to CEO Mo. Secretary Ku immediately smelled the porridge and looked at Jean Wan with bright eyes. The red dates and glutinous rice are good for the stomach, but Mrs. Mo, aren't you going in? Didn't you come to see CEO Mo? I won't go in and disturb him. You don't have to say that I bought this porridge. Jean Wan said and smiled at him again, her attitude calm and unperturbed. Although Secretary Ku was dutiful, he didn't know as much as Shen Mu about the relationship between Jean Wan and Mo Jingshan. Hearing Jean Wan's words, he nodded and turned to walk to the CEO's office. 5 minutes later, Secretary Ku came out and took out the bowl of porridge in his hand. Jean Wan was about to leave, but she still hesitated in the corridor for a long time. When she looked back, she saw Secretary Ku coming out. Mrs. Mo, why don't you take it in? Secretary Ku was a tall man. He held the bowl in one hand and pushed up the glasses on the bridge of his nose with the other. He said in frustration, I asked CEO Mo to eat some porridge before he started working, but he didn't even pay attention to me. He even asked me to take out the porridge and pour it out. Jean Wan narrowed her eyes. Did you tell him that I bought this porridge? How did you know? Secretary Ku coughed and looked embarrassed. Jean Wan resisted the urge to roll her eyes. Why did you tell him? I was afraid that CEO Mo wouldn't drink it. I thought that since you bought it, he would know your good intentions and drink some, but who knew that he would ask me to take it out and throw it away, Secretary Ku said with a wronged expression. Seeing Jean Wan didn't speak, Secretary Ku pushed the porridge in front of her again. Why don't you go in and have a try? Why should she try? If she went in, the porridge would not be as simple as being thrown away. Secretary Ku didn't notice Jean Wan's expression. He stuffed the porridge into her hand and pointed to the secretary's office. I was sorting out the contract just now, and there are still some parts that haven't been sorted out. I'll leave the porridge to you, Mrs. Mo. I'll go back first. With that, Secretary Ku slipped back to the secretary's office. Jean Wan stood outside the door of the CEO's office, looking at the bowl of porridge in her hand that could be thrown away at any time, and fell into a dilemma of hesitation. If she didn't take it in, the bowl of porridge would be cold. After hesitating for a moment, Jean Wan raised her hand and knocked on the door, but there was no response. She pushed the door open and walked in. As soon as she entered, she shivered. Although it was minus 30 degrees outside at night, the air conditioner in this office was too cold. Glancing at the 18 degrees displayed on the air conditioner, Jean Wan glanced at the man behind the desk, and then turned around to look for the remote control of the air conditioner. The air conditioner in his office wasn't the integrated kind, but a separate one. After finding the remote control, she raised the number of the air conditioner, turned her eyes, and stared fixedly at the man who was staring at her without a word because she came in. The temperature in the office gradually rose, and it was neither too hot nor too cold. Jean Wan was still dressed in the white t-shirt and jeans she had been wearing for the past few days. Her hair was tied loosely behind her head, and she wore no makeup. Her brows were as calm as ever, her eyes dark and bright, and her skin fair. She never liked to put on makeup, and her facial features were beautiful. At this moment, she was no longer as tentative and careful as before. There was no smile on her face. Holding the porridge bowl in both hands, she walked over and put the bowl on his desk. Chapter 395. Mo Jingshan glanced at her expressionlessly. Obviously, he had no intention of eating it. Jean Wan stood in this familiar office. The man in front of her was no longer as gentle as he used to be. He exuded obvious alienation and indifference. Jean Wan could see his dissatisfaction from his eyes, so she smiled knowingly. Don't get me wrong. I'm not here to pester you. CEO Mo, you can think of it as the person in charge of my small studio. After you invested 200 million yuan in our studio, I came here to curry favor with you. Just think about it from another perspective. With that, she suddenly turned and walked to his break room. Eat your food. I'll go to your break room and take away all the clothes you bought for me in the wardrobe. Then, she walked straight in without looking back. She acted as if she were just passing by his office. The break room was still the same. It was silent. She turned on the light, and the cold-toned, completely masculine break room was in front of her. Jean Wan went straight to the wardrobe and opened it. Sure enough, she saw that so many clothes he had prepared for her were still here. If a person really hated another person, he would hate even the slightest trace of the other person. After he was done with his work in the company, he would live here. Recently, he had also lived in the company for a long time, but none of her things had been thrown away. They were all intact and even neatly placed in the closet. Jean Wan was not in a hurry to take away her things. She took a step back, retreated to the bed, sat down, and looked up at the clothes in the wardrobe. The office outside the door was very quiet. She didn't know whether Mo Jingshan had eaten porridge or not, but Secretary Kus said that he had been busy all night. If he really refused to accept her kindness, she could only call Shen Mu and ask him to contact a nearby hotel to send some food over. Now Jean Wan did whatever she wanted. After calling Shen Mu, regardless of whether Mo Jingshan would eat or not, she just sat on the bed and stared at the clothes in the wardrobe. The air conditioner in the office had been adjusted to the most comfortable temperature by Jean Wan. Mo Jingshan looked at the bowl of porridge placed alone on the desk. After a long while, he put down the pen in his hand and rubbed between his eyebrows. Then Mo Jingshan received a call from the United States. CEOMO. Su Jilan committed suicide in prison. Fortunately, we found her in time and barely saved her life when she was sent to the hospital, but the medical conditions in prison are too poor. She coughed up blood yesterday and kept asking to see you or call you. The man put down his hand that was rubbing between his brows. There was no joy or anger in his words. His calm voice carried a chilling indifference. What? Has the LAPD become so indecisive that they can't even control a person who's trying to make trouble inside? Do you still need me to show up? This. The man on the other side of the phone was covered in a cold sweat. CEOMO, the Su family can't save her now, but Su Jilan said she used to be your fiancé. I think she's spoiled and can't stand the suffering inside. She has lost a lot of weight and keeps asking to see you every day. If it were someone else, we'd deal with it the same way, but after all, she used to be with you. Mo Jingshan's tone was indifferent. For such an unruly person inside, deal with her the way you do. But in her current state, if she dies here one day, we're afraid. Don't tell me anything about this Miss Su in the future. Whether she lives or dies, it's her own fault. It has nothing to do with anyone else. After hanging up the phone, Mo Jingshan turned his eyes to the door of the lounge. Jean Wan had been in there for a while, but she didn't come out. A moment later, the man got up, opened the door, and walked in. Stepping into the cool-toned lounge, he saw the woman who had just seriously said she would come in to take away her clothes, only to fall asleep on his bed. Seeing that she had been sitting at the end of the bed and then lay back to sleep, the man walked around the big bed, walked unhurriedly to the window, and drew the curtains with his left hand, covering all the lights and neon lights outside. Then he turned his eyes to the open wardrobe, where her clothes were hanging safely, occupying half of the space. He didn't feel it was an eyesore when he lived here every day, but now that the woman had checked them, Mo Jingshan finally felt something was wrong. He was about to take the clothes out of the wardrobe, but as soon as his hand touched one of them, he paused. With a bang, the man closed the wardrobe door. When he closed it, his hand was still empty, and he didn't take off any clothes. Jean Wan didn't expect that she would fall asleep in Mo Jingshan's office. She was going to pack up her clothes, but she fell asleep while sitting. After waking up, she closed her eyes for a long time before she had the courage to open them. She moved and found that she was still in the position of lying at the end of the bed. Her legs were hanging behind the end of the bed, and because of this position, they were a little numb. Hiss, she made a small sound. It was very light, but in the quiet lounge, it was particularly obvious. The man standing tall in front of the window turned around. You're awake? Jean Wan was startled. She didn't expect him to be here. She turned her head and saw the man standing not far away. He had one hand in the pocket of his trousers. He was still wearing the same flawless trousers and shirt from last night. He was standing there with his back to the morning sun shining through the window. He lowered his head and looked at her indifferently. Standing against the light, he seemed to be gilded with a layer of gold, but she couldn't see his expression. Looking at him like this, Jean Wan was in an indescribable trance for several seconds. However, when she was in a trance thinking that he was still her Mo Jingshan, the man gave her a faint smile, but his smile was too cold. Although you want to play the warm card in front of me, you have to remember clearly that I haven't lost my memory. I don't need you to remind me of all the beauty and warmth that happened in the past. It's a waste of time and emotion to touch me in this way. He might as well not speak and just stand here. She could still have a sweet dream. His words shattered her dream again. Jean Wan closed her eyes, opened them again, sat up, raised her hand to rub her hair, and said tiredly, I've been doing manual work in the new office building these days. I didn't expect that I could fall asleep sitting here. When she said this, she seemed to be mocking herself. Mo Jingshan, if you don't speak, you're really beautiful and pleasing to the eye, but now as soon as you speak, you directly poke at my heart. Really? She smiled. Don't you think so? Chapter 396. Jean Wan sighed. Although she had a good sleep, her legs were still a little numb. She hammered her legs and looked up at him. "I'll pack my clothes in a minute. It's already dawn. Did you stay up all night? Is it because I took up your break room, or? I'll find time to rest when I'm tired." His words had cut off all her concern. Forget it. She wouldn't argue with him. Jean Wan got up, opened the wardrobe, and began to pack her clothes without a word. She took them off one by one and threw them on the bed behind her, saying, "I'll ask someone to send me a suitcase later. You bought so many clothes for me. I can't take them away without a suitcase." The man didn't speak. It took Jean Wan more than 10 minutes to take out half of the women's clothes in the wardrobe. Then she fixed her eyes on the shirts inside, suddenly raised her hand, pulled off several shirts, and threw them hard on the bed. She turned to see Mo Jingshan's deep eyes staring at the shirts as though he was deep in thought. "I've also worn these shirts of yours. More than once, I've swaggered around here in your shirts. Now that I'm packing up, I'll take these shirts away with me." Jean Wan turned her face away from him and stared at the shirts. The man was silent for a moment, turned his head to look out of the window, and said indifferently, "Up to you." Jean Wan pursed her lips, suddenly turned around, pulled out 2 suits from the wardrobe, and threw them on the bed. When the man left the window and walked out coldly without looking at her, she said to his back, "I've worn these coats before." "And?" The man grunted, opened the door of the break room, and walked out. Damn it. He didn't react at all. Jean Wan wanted to run out and say, "I've slept with this man many times. Shall I take this man with me?" But reason held her back, telling her that enough was enough. Right now, Mo Jingshan was much more stubborn than her. If she really did something too irrational, who knew what would happen to him? She called Xia Tian, and Xia Tian would pick her up with a suitcase. Jean Wan washed up in the break room, dried her hair, and changed her clothes. When she walked out of the break room, she saw Shenmu entering the office. When he saw Jean Wan, he habitually nodded to her in greeting. Jean Wan waved at him as though nothing had happened. On the contrary, Mo Jingshan remained expressionless. Jean Wan glanced at his desk. The porridge bowl was gone, and the food that she had asked Shenmu to send over last night was also gone. Someone must have taken it away. She didn't know if Mo Jingshan had eaten it or not, but the chances of him eating it were very slim. Xia Tian had promised Jean Wan to pick her up, but she didn't tell Jean Wan that she had set a new cooperation plan with BGY Group yesterday. On the day of the meeting, she had also arranged a dinner with their general manager, Mr. Vince. The next afternoon, when Jean Wan was about to get off work, Xia Tian suddenly mentioned such a dinner party. Jean Wan was baffled. "Didn't you say that the cooperation plan is set for next month? Why is it so sudden? Anyway, this deal can't escape from our hands. That Mr. Vince also wants to curry favor with you, so he gave us the plan in advance. We'll just sign the contract a month in advance." Xia Tian winked at her. "You have to go to this dinner party tonight. If you dare to screw me up, I'll resign in front of you." Jean Wan, in the past, when she and BGY often worked together, she had a lot of contact with that Mr. Vince. However, after learning about the flowers, she almost cut off contact with Mr. Vince. She thought that the other party was very sensible and understood her attitude, so he didn't pester her. However, this time, instead of sending flowers, she gave them the plan she had planned in advance. Although it wasn't the first time that Jean Wan had gone through the back door, the feeling of being forced to do something beyond her own abilities was really uncomfortable. This clearly made her owe Mr. Vince a favor. Jean Wan glared at Xia Tian. Xia Tian narrowed her eyes and smiled at her. Her expression was as though saying, "Since this great aunt wants to help you find a second spring, you have to go whether you want to or not." That night, Jean Wan was dragged to this dinner party by Xia Tian. Although it was called a dinner party, it was nothing more than eating, drinking, and talking about cooperation projects in a high-end hotel. After the dinner, they couldn't leave immediately, so they found a nearby entertainment club to drink and sing. Every time they met, it was the same. Dinner parties were nothing more than eating, playing cards, drinking, or doing something more in-depth. People in the business world knew these things too well and were familiar with many things. However, there were many upright people who simply took advantage of such an occasion to promote their relationship, business, and cooperation. The dinner party that Jean Wan participated in was already very high-end. If it were Mo Jingxin's dinner party, everyone would probably treat him like a Buddha, and no one would dare to ask him to condescend to participate in it in person. Just now, because of the spicy food, Jean Wan's stomach was not feeling well, so she didn't eat much. After arriving at the club, when everyone was having a good time, Jean Wan took a stack of matcha cakes and a glass of red wine to fill her stomach. As soon as she took a few bites, Mr. Vince came straight to her and sat down next to her. Jean Wan couldn't help but put down the glass and cake in her hand and said politely, "Sorry, I didn't eat much just now, so I'm a little hungry." "You should eat. What's there to be embarrassed about?" Mr. Vince smiled and sat next to her, looking at her plain appearance. Unlike other women who specially dressed up in a dinner party, she was so simple and casual that he wondered if he could smell the clean scent of shower gel and shampoo on her when he held her. Seeing Jean Wan didn't talk much as usual, he said, "I heard that you used to eat spicy food. What's wrong with you today? Is your stomach uncomfortable?" "Well, I'm a little uncomfortable." Jean Wan smiled politely at him and didn't explain too much. She moved aside another centimeter unobtrusively, trying to keep a distance from him. Chapter 397. Jean Wan smiled politely. "Thank you. 1 cup is enough for me." At this moment, Mr. Vince's secretary also sat down. The secretary was very young and most likely had a good impression of the handsome, rich, and young Mr. Vince. When she sat down, her gaze landed on Jean Wan's ring finger. Looking at her clean and slender fingers, she asked with a smile, "If I remember correctly, Miss G, you've been married for a long time, haven't you? Why haven't I seen you wearing a ring when we've seen you with our general manager?" Jean Wan lowered her head, forked another piece of matcha cake, and fed it into her mouth. After swallowing, she glanced at the secretary and said mildly, "You're thinner than when you got married, and your finger bones are too thin. I can't wear the ring, so I left it at home." "Why? Is it strange not to wear a ring after getting married?" "Of course it's not strange. It's just that I've never seen you wear a ring, nor have I seen you and Mr. Mo appear at the same time. Those who don't know might think that you're no longer together, or that Miss G deliberately let others think that you're single so that it's convenient for you to go out and socialize." The secretary looked at her face and only smiled. Back when Miss G and Mr. Mo got married, many girls in High City were heartbroken. I don't know why Miss G couldn't get over it. Instead of staying at home, she insisted on starting her own business. Her words were nothing more than reminding Mr. Vince beside her that Jean Wan was a married woman, and her husband was Mo Jingxin, whom he absolutely could not afford to offend. Mr. Vince couldn't possibly be unaware of this, and this secretary was clearly taking the opportunity to remind him. Jean Wan did not speak. She had no interest in the two people beside her, so these undercurrents between others were meaningless to her. "Last time, I heard from your assistant that Miss G, it seems that you've been very close to the bosses of various partners recently. You've been so busy dealing with them that you didn't even have time to accept our manager's invitations. It's really not easy to see Miss G today, but Miss G seems to be absent-minded. It seems that you're determined to win BGY's cooperation proposal and aren't taking it seriously at all." Jean Wan did not raise her eyes. She said mildly and indifferently, "Isn't the most appropriate display of seriousness after discussing the contract and the progress of the cooperation more important? Wasn't all the smiling faces before signing the contract just an earnest greeting? We're all old acquaintances, and it's not the first time we've cooperated. You should know the efficiency of our studio and the price of the purchase price. Why do you still need to do so much? As for saying that Jean Wan didn't have time to accept Mr. Vince's invitation, it was true that Jean Wan told Xiao Ba to say so, but to say that Jean Wan was busy dealing with the bosses of other partners. Haha. Jean Wan smiled without saying anything. Jean Wan's expression remained cold and disdainful. The secretary was about to say something when Mr. Vince said coldly, "Are you drunk today? You've only had a few drinks and you're already talking nonsense?" The secretary was stunned. She knew her boss's temper very well. She was unhappy and wanted to come over to mock Jean Wan, but when she heard this warning, she did not dare to say anything more. She took the opportunity to get up and walk away, but she still glanced at Jean Wan from time to time, as if she was afraid that Mr. Vince and Jean Wan would have any ambiguous relationship or further intimacy. She finally quieted down, but Jean Wan still looked indifferent. Mr. Vince handed her a stack of cake next to him. "Don't mind." Jean Wan smiled and took the cake. "It's nothing. People like you never lack admirers and suitors. Such a secretary is just one of them. It's not like I haven't seen this kind of secretary before." "Of course, I don't mind." Mr. Vince raised his eyebrows. "Then how many admirers and pursuers do you have around you?" Jean Wan's hand paused on the fork and turned to look at Mr. Vince. At the moment they looked at each other, Xia Tian suddenly raised her cell phone and took a photo of the two of them. Jean Wan paused and turned to look at Xia Tian with a jerk, but Xia Tian proudly held up her cell phone and shook it at her. Seeing her secretly pleased expression, Jean Wan knew that she was up to no good. Besides, Xia Tian had been very hostile to Mo Jingshan recently. She didn't know what Xia Tian would do if she took a photo that could easily be misunderstood. She quickly got up. "I'm going to talk to Xia Tian. I'll call someone else to come and drink with you later. I'll leave you." Jean Wan's face was cold when she got up. This was not the first time that Mr. Vince had met her. He knew that she was not as reckless as other female leaders of companies, but this was indeed the Jean Wan he knew. Mr. Vince didn't say much. He smiled and moved his legs to let her pass, without any intention of chatting or pestering her. He was a gentleman. If he hadn't been a gentleman, Jean Wan would have given up the cooperation with BGY Group and wouldn't have come to this kind of social event. Jean Wan quickly walked up to Xia Tian and reached out. "Give me your cell phone." "No." Xia Tian was also eating cake, protecting her cell phone as she ate. Jean Wan's face was cold. "Give it to me." Seeing that Jean Wan was about to be angry, Xia Tian simply reached out to pull her over, let Jean Wan sit next to her, and then picked up the cell phone to show her the photo. "Look, the angle at which you and Mr. Vince look at each other is perfect. But there is still a gap of 10 centimeters between your shoulders. Right? As you said in the magazine last time, you didn't hug or kiss each other. So what if you took a photo? Don't you think so?" Jean Wan didn't speak and reached out to grab it, but Xia Tian suddenly took back the cell phone and put it back in her pocket, not letting her touch it at all. There were so many people here, so Jean Wan couldn't grab it openly. She could only lean close to her and say in a voice that only she could hear, "You can take it, but don't send it out. Do you hear me?" Xia Tian snorted. "It depends on my mood. Anyway, don't send it." "Oh, then I'll send it to Mo Jingshan alone. If you want to die, send it to him." "You mean if I send this kind of photo to him, he'll kill me?" "No, you'll probably die in my hands first." Jean Wan's face was cold. Xia Tian, dash. Chapter 398. Jean Wan really did not like the occasion that Xia Tian had deliberately arranged tonight. Although it was true that the main purpose was to discuss the cooperation with BGY, from the very beginning, she had deliberately given her and Mr. Vince some space to flirt. This goal alone made it impossible for Jean Wan to stay in this private room. Although she knew that Xia Tian would not be so impulsive as to randomly send out the photos, and that she only wanted to make her happy or divert her attention, Jean Wan did not have much of a good impression of Mr. Vince and his secretary. After chatting with everyone for a while, Jean Wan used the excuse of going out to get the drink list to get some fresh air. She picked up her bag and headed out. She had always been very clear about the matters between men and women. In her previous life, no matter how irrational she would not mess around with a man she did not like. In this life, it was even more so. Jean Wan had just stepped out of the private room and was about to head to the front desk of the club to ask for another drink list when she suddenly heard a woman's low cry from the corridor of the private room. "Let go. I told you to let go." This voice was slightly familiar. Jean Wan paused in her steps and turned to look behind her. When she heard the voice earlier, she thought it was Shi Niange. Now that she looked back, she saw that it was indeed Shi Niange who was desperately trying to shake off the hands of the two men dressed in black. Shi Niange was usually a very gentle beauty. This was the first time Jean Wan had heard such a sharp voice from her. The corridor was very quiet. The people in the surrounding private rooms had already poked their heads out to look in this direction. However, everyone only glanced coldly at them before closing the door and ignoring them. Jean Wan saw that the two men had lowered their heads and were saying something to Shi Niange with cold expressions. However, Shi Niange was frantically trying to free her hands from their hands. Her eyes were filled with hatred and panic, and even traces of fear and helplessness could be seen. Jean Wan furrowed her brows. Although her relationship with Shi Niange was not particularly deep, they were at least acquaintances. However, even if it was only for Qin's sighting's sake, she felt that she had to help Shi Niange. More importantly, in her view, Shi Niange's face was red, and the redness was somewhat abnormal. "Let go. I didn't agree to your boss deal. Miss Shi, I advise you to be sensible. If you, such a young woman, want to take over Shida Group, you have to see if our boss agrees to let you take that position. Your father's company has been in the hands of our boss for a long time. Your father also intends to let you marry over. Since he has called you back from the United States, you know what he means. You can't hide from our boss after hiding for so many months. You might as well give in." The two of them didn't use too much force and didn't intend to hurt her. However, they didn't let her go and kept holding her back. Shi Niange's gaze became more and more anxious, and her breathing became heavier. It turns out that from the beginning, he planned to step on our Shi family's heads. Back then, my father shouldn't have handed most of the power in his hands to him. What boss? Didn't he take advantage of our cooperation to devour everything of the Shi family step by step? Now, he's using something that belongs to me to challenge me. Who gave him the right to do so? Who gave him the courage? Do you think you can disregard the law just because your family is powerful? Miss Shi, you'd better be rational. Go in and have a good talk with our boss. I told you to go away. Shi Niange said angrily, "Let go. Let go of me. If you don't let go, I'll really call the police. Miss Shi, go away. Miss Shi, you'd better come in with us quickly. If the boss is angry, you won't have a good ending either. Let go. Don't touch me." Jean Wan walked over and said coldly, "Gentlemen, I'm sorry. Just now, I didn't know what was going on here. I saw someone shouting to call the police, so I called the police. I don't know if it will cause you any trouble, but the police station is not far from here. The police are already on their way." She spoke as if she had accidentally called the police, but her tone was cold and full of warning. The two men finally let go of Shi Niange's hand, but they obviously looked at Jean Wan unhappily, despising her for being a busybody. Jean Wan walked over and stood in front of Shi Niange. Seeing the abnormal blush on her face, she felt that she seemed to have been drugged. She wanted to escape but was stopped by the two men. "Miss Shi." At this time, one of the two men looked at Shi Niange with a cold expression and said very vaguely, "I advise you to go with us." I'm afraid nothing good will happen to you in your current situation. After all, our boss is an old acquaintance of yours. If you meet a stranger like this. Shi Nian's hand trembled as she raised it and grabbed Jin Wan's wrist. Jin Wan felt the heat on her wrist. Sure enough, she guessed right. She must have been drugged. No need. I'll stay here with her and wait for the police to come. Shi Nian's voice trembled slightly, but her tone was extremely firm. Hearing that she was also threatening them with the police, the two men hesitated and finally gave her a warning look. Miss Shi, you'd better behave yourself. If you leave like this today, if our boss is unhappy, we can't guarantee the future of Shida Group. Feeling the stiffness in Shi Nian's hand, Jin Wan subconsciously held Shi Nian's hand, lest she really made an irrational choice when she was not sober and irrational. The two men stared at them for a while. Seeing that Jin Wan was going to stick her nose into other people's business, they turned and left unhappily. When the two men walked away and entered a private room, Jin Wan took the opportunity to help Shi Nian into the bathroom not far away. Miss Shi, are you all right? Shi Nian forced a smile. I'm fine. Are you not feeling well? Or? Jin Wan raised her hand to feel the temperature of her face. Did you drink something dirty? Shi Nian was a little embarrassed. She hesitated before answering. The thing I drank was indeed drugged. I don't know much about the medicinal properties of this thing. I'm really not feeling well now. I'm sorry, Miss G. Can you send me back to the hotel now? I'm afraid I can't go on my own now. All right, I'll send you. There were many hotels near this entertainment club. Since Shi Nian said so, she probably lived nearby. Chapter 399. Of course, she didn't mean to send Shi Nian to Qin's sighting like this, which was no different from sending a sheep into a tiger's mouth. But in her impression, the only person related to Shi Nian seemed to be Qin's sighting, not to mention the two of them were emotionally involved. I'm afraid you can't go back to your room like this. I'll call Dr. Qin, or I'll take you to the hospital. Shi Nian didn't seem to hear Jin Wan's words. Her body was hot, her cheeks were red, and her eyes were blurred. She staggered against Jin Wan's side. Seeing that she didn't hear her clearly, Jin Wan helped her steady and was about to walk out of the club when she saw a young man coming out of the private room the two men had entered. The man was a well-known figure in High City. Jin Wan seemed to have brushed past him at a banquet. She only had a very faint impression of him, but he seemed to have a very subtle relationship with Shida Group. The man glanced in this direction. To avoid getting into trouble, Jin Wan quickly took Shi Nian to hide behind the corner. When the man looked away again, she took Shi Nian and carefully slipped out of the club along the crowd in front of the door. Let's go. I'll take you to the hospital. Jin Wan also drank some wine tonight and couldn't drive. She helped Shi Nian to the roadside to stop a taxi. Shi Nian was probably really confused and irrational. Following by Jin Wan's side, she nodded in panic and then shook her head. After helping her into the taxi, he told her the address of High City Central Hospital. He then raised his hand to grab Shi Nian's hand that was about to pull open her clothes. He picked up his phone with the other hand and hesitated for a moment. He then glanced at the male driver in the taxi. The driver kept glancing at the rearview mirror, as though he had noticed that Shi Nian's condition was not right. Two women, one of whom had been drugged and looked seductive, faced the male driver who looked strong and strong. Jin Wan secretly sent a text message to Qin sighting with her cell phone, but she didn't know when he would see it. Dr. Qin, are you in the hospital? Shi Nian was drugged and is now with me. Should I take her to the hospital or do you want to come to a nearby hotel? Less than a minute after the message was sent, Qin Shiding called. What the hell are you texting? Qin Sighting's tone was cold. Obviously, it was because she was talking about Shi Nian, but even if it sounded cold, didn't he immediately call back? These duplicitous men were really in need of a lesson. Miss Shi is with me right now. Are you coming? Jean Wan only asked, but her eyes were wary of the male driver who kept glancing at them. Qin's sighting was silent for a moment. Jean Wan glanced at the driver's license plate and license plate number on the front of the taxi. I'm on Luyin Road right now. The taxi I took is High AR 589X. Are you going to rush over yourself, or should I bring someone over to look for you? The driver's eyes were originally fixed on Shinianj, who was clearly drugged. When he suddenly heard Jean Wan tell him the license plate number of the taxi, he immediately calmed down, withdrew his gaze from the rearview mirror, and drove seriously, not daring to have any other thoughts. Qin's sighting clearly heard the caution in Jean Wan's words. Luyin Road was not far from the hospital. He said coldly, I just finished an operation. Send her to the hospital first. When they finally arrived at the hospital, Jean Wan helped Shinianj out of the car. Although it was already dark, there were many people in front of the hospital. Shinianj's breathing was heavy, and her face was too red. When they entered the hospital, they did not make much noise, but they still attracted attention. It was not until they entered the elevator that it became quieter. After entering the hospital, Shinianj seemed to have figured out where she was. She was clearly uneasy, staring at the numbers on the elevator in a daze. I'm not sure if it's appropriate to send you to Dr. Qin. Right now, if you're still awake, you can refuse. I can send you to the hotel immediately, Jean Wan said softly. Shinianj leaned against her. Her hot breathing and increasingly heavy breathing made her look very uncomfortable. At this moment, she suddenly smiled and said hoarsely in a low voice, It's not that I haven't slept with him, but looking at me now, I'm afraid the only way he can help me is to give me a tranquilizer. He won't do anything like what you think. Jean Wan did not speak anymore, holding her steadily with her hand. Although she did not ask more, she remembered that Nanhang had said that Shinianj had gone to America 4 or 5 years ago. Shinianj was 2 years older than Jean Wan. In the months after returning to China, the relationship between her and Qin's sighting had clearly not eased. If they had really slept together, could it be that when she was 17 or 18, she and Qin's sighting, Shinianj did not know if she was really confused by the drug. She leaned against Jean Wan's side, saying hoarsely and softly, Back then, before I returned to America, I got him drunk and fell on him. After I raped him, I patted my butt and left. I've been gone for so many years. She smiled as she spoke, but there was loneliness in her eyes. At that time, I was indeed young and impetuous, and I was indeed too selfish. When I chased him, I was so passionate, and when I left, I was so resolute and thorough. It's understandable that he hates me, Jean Wan. What could she say? She could only say that it was already very impressive that Shinianj had the courage to tear Dr. Qin's clothes. She could even rape a grown man. She could only give her a thumbs up. Impressive, impressive, really impressive. When they arrived at the floor where Qin's sighting's consulting room was located, Jean Wan directly led them over. Qin's sighting had just finished an operation and was probably in the ward telling the patient's family something. There was no one in the consulting room. Jean Wan lowered the temperature of the air conditioner so that the slightly cooler air could make Shinianj feel more comfortable. Just as Shinianj was helped to sit on the bed in the consulting room, the door opened. Qin's sighting was wearing a white shirt and trousers. When he entered, he only put his white coat in the crook of his arm. As soon as he came in, he saw Shinianj sitting there. At a glance, he could tell that she was indeed not the same as usual. He paused and turned to look at Jean Wan. Where did you meet her? My studio had a dinner party tonight. We were drinking in the entertainment club downstairs of the Greenwood Hotel. She was pestered by 2 men in the corridor. I saw that she seemed to be in a bad condition, so I took the opportunity to take her away. Jean Wan said and glanced at the time. I'll leave her to you. I'll go first. Jean Wan was about to leave. Seeing that Qin's sighting was probably not in the mood to chat with her, she said before walking out of the door, By the way, the person who drugged her seems to be surnamed Shao. That person has some status in high city, but I don't know much about him. I only know his surname. Chapter 400. My colleagues from the studio are still in the club. I'll take a taxi back. You don't have to worry about me. Jean Wan waved at him and happily opened the door to leave. Qin Sighting glanced at the time. It was not safe for a woman like Jean Wan to go out and take a taxi by herself at such a late hour. He was about to call Mo Jingshan when Shi Nianj fell from the bed. His gaze faltered, and he rushed forward to carry her up. Jean Wan walked out of the hospital and was about to take a taxi when two black Mercedes stopped in front of her. The window of one of the cars rolled down, and the man with the surname Xiao sat in the car coldly, looking at her coldly, as if a venomous snake had suddenly jumped out of nowhere, staring at her coldly and fixedly. You know Shi Nianj, the man's surname Xiao asked. Jean Wan looked at him mildly. It seemed like when she came out of the club, these people had already followed the taxi all the way. They had personally seen her send Shi Nianj to Qin Sighting's place. If she said that she didn't know him, she would only be lying to herself. No one would believe her. I don't know her, but I've seen her a few times. Jean Wan's tone was indifferent. Earlier, Miss Shi said she wasn't feeling well and asked me to send her to Central Hospital. I took a taxi to send her here. Is there anything wrong with that? The man surnamed Xiao lifted the corner of his lips. His voice was cold. You sent the woman I wanted to Qin Sighting's place. Tell me, is there anything wrong with that? He was quite direct. He didn't hide anything in his words at all. Jean Wan was expressionless. I'm sorry. I've only met Miss Shi a few times. I don't know much about her. Even if I helped her out, I only sent her to the hospital. By sending her to this hospital, you've rescued this little rabbit from my cage. The man surnamed Xiao narrowed his eyes coldly. My rabbit is gone. Tell me, what should I do with you? The man's words sounded extremely gentle, but if one listened carefully, they were cold and frightening. His eyes seemed to be smiling, but they were sizing her up. Then what do you want? Jean Wan asked in return. There was no fear in her eyes. The other party watched her for a moment with a faint smile, slowly saying, the rabbit that I've carefully raised abroad for several years has disappeared. This cage is empty, and it looks lonely. Why don't I catch another rabbit? Even if it's not the original one, at least it doesn't look too bad. Of the two famous young ladies in Hai Cheng, aside from Shi Nianj, it's you, Miss Ji, isn't it? The composure on Jean Wan's face cracked. You know me? The man laughed coldly, and the back door was opened by another man who looked like a bodyguard. Miss Ji, if you know what's good for you, get in the car. The man surnamed Xiao looked at her, his eyes seemed to be smiling but not smiling, seemingly cold but not cold. Jean Wan did not move. Her cool and quiet voice slowly came out of her mouth. Since you know me, you should know who's behind me. You dare to touch me, are you sure? The man surnamed Xiao looked at her expression that was neither afraid nor flustered and smiled coldly. His tone was indifferent as he said, the person you can't offend the most in Hai Cheng is not the high officials or the mayor, but Mo Jingshan. You have the Mo family behind you. Of course I know that. But the people who are afraid of the Mo family don't include me, Xiao Lui. The man clearly did not intend to speak any more nonsense. The car window slowly rolled up. However, the car door in front of Jean Wan remained open. The bodyguard said coldly, please get in. Jean Wan still did not move. If I don't do it, are you going to use force? The bodyguard said expressionlessly, then don't blame us for being impolite. Our CEO Xiao has always been polite to women. Don't refuse a toast and drink a forfeit. Is drugging Miss Shi considered being polite to a woman? Jean Wan asked with a mocking smile. The bodyguard still said coldly, Miss Shi is just a special case. It was her father who drugged her, not our CEO Xiao. If he wants a woman, he doesn't have to do that. This kind of thing had little to do with Jean Wan. She was just listening, but now it seemed that if she didn't get in the car, it would only lead to more unnecessary consequences. Even if she resisted with all her might, it would be useless. She looked around. There were no patrolling police cars, and it was already past 10:00 in the evening. There were fewer people in front of the hospital than before. If she rashly called the police or asked for help, her cell phone would probably be taken away. After thinking for a while, she didn't resist anymore and obediently got in the car. Xiao Lui sat in the passenger seat and silently watched Jean Wan get in the car through the rearview mirror. Jean Wan didn't resist at all after getting in the car. She just pressed the bag in her hand and asked calmly, "Is this kidnapping or what? Can you not confiscate my bag and cell phone?" Xiao Lui looked back at her. "Have you ever seen me kidnap someone in such a moral way?" Jean Wan also coldly looked at the bodyguard outside the car door and the driver in black in the car. "If this isn't kidnapping, what is it? I've made it very clear. The rabbit in my cage has run away. I have to catch another one. I'm married. Why do you want to catch a married woman? That's not necessarily the case. You, rabbit, are more interesting. Moreover, you're very useful. At the very least, you can invite this god, Mo Jingshan, out." Was he going to use her as bait to lure Mo Jingshan out? Jean Wan instinctively sat up stiffly and was about to resist, but then she realized that she was alone in the face of 2 cars of men and bodyguards. She was afraid that she was overestimating herself. She looked at the man sitting in the passenger seat. "No matter how sophisticated your kidnapping method is, it's still kidnapping." Xiao Lui coldly raised his eyebrows and didn't reply. Obviously, no matter what she thought, she couldn't escape now. Since the other party didn't intend to hurt her for the time being, Jean Wan didn't make too much noise in his car. Since she was already here, she might as well take things as they come. She leaned against the car door and looked out of the window. The car was air-conditioned and quiet, so she could silently feel the coldness, danger, and mystery emanating from this man surnamed Xiao. The author's words, 1. It's not that the female lead isn't decisive, but a person who has truly loved won't believe that love is gone just like that. She tried hard to fight for it, which means she didn't disappoint the one she once loved. Even if one day, as you say, she really doesn't come back, she won't feel guilty. 2. When the time is right, I'll torture back. I know the pace of the plot, so I don't have to worry that I'll go astray, or that I won't be able to make up for it. 3. Releasing chapters is very tiring, especially for a stay-at-home mom like me who has a baby to take care of. It's very difficult for me to save some chapters. I have to wait for the baby to go to bed before I can squeeze out time to write. My schedule is very irregular, and I write very slowly. I'm also very envious of those who can write more than 10,000 words a day. Chapter 401. Jean Wan was taken to a villa. It was a very luxurious and large villa. However, this villa was halfway up a mountain in the east of High City. It was surrounded by mountains. The environment and air seemed good, and no one restricted her freedom. However, her cell phone signal and internet connection were blocked. Moreover, there was no way she could leave this place unless she drove or took a car. Not to mention that there might be beasts on the mountain once she left the villa area. This rugged mountain road was built by them, and it was impossible for her to walk down it. Jean Wan was asked to stay here for one night. There was no one inside, only a servant in her 40s or 50s who could cook. The servant was mute. In the evening, Jean Wan found that the mute was not born mute, but her tongue had been cut off, and she looked horrible when she opened her mouth. Because of this, when Jean Wan spoke, the mute servant could hear her. After all, she was not born deaf and mute. She was served well here. After Xiao Lui personally sent her here, he only told her to stay here obediently. After being isolated here for 3 days, Jean Wan finally couldn't stay calm anymore. Anyone in such a place with no signal, no internet, and no freedom, except to eat, drink, and sleep well, would collapse, not to mention she was here with a strange servant whose tongue had been cut off. Every time the helper opened her mouth, Jean Wan would be afraid. What she was afraid of was not the helper, but what kind of people these people were. To be able to forcefully cut off a person's tongue, this kind of cruel method was clearly perverted. Now they were also perverted to keep her here. On the fourth day, Jean Wan couldn't sit still anymore. Several times, she wanted to go out, but the servant would pull her, saying, "Ah, ah, ah," and pointing to the wild forest outside the villa, meaning that it was very dangerous outside, and if she didn't leave by car, she would be in danger and couldn't go out. Jean Wan could only sit in the front yard of the villa in vain, holding the cell phone that was fully charged but had no signal. She dialed 110 again and again, dialed Immerse's number, and dialed the numbers of all the people she might know, but the call didn't go through. On the morning of the fifth day, Xiao Lui came with a rabbit that he seemed to have just caught at the foot of the mountain. Covered in blood, Rabbit was dragged into the villa by the ear by a bodyguard. Jean Wan hadn't slept well these days. She sat in front of the villa with dark circles under her eyes. When she saw Xiao Lui come in, she couldn't help asking, "How long are you going to keep me here?" Xiao Lui glanced at her expressionlessly, took the rabbit from the bodyguard's hand and threw it in front of her. Jean Wan subconsciously dodged backward. She lowered her head to look at the bloodied rabbit on the ground and instantly felt a chill run down her spine. She raised her head to look at him. "Are you a pervert? Have you ever seen a pervert give a roasted rabbit to his prisoner?" Jean Wan glanced at the dead rabbit on the ground and took a step back. "I'm not interested in eating it." Xiao Lui expressionlessly walked past her. When he entered the villa, he glanced at the breakfast placed on the dining table. Seeing that it hadn't been touched, he glanced back at Jean Wan. "Miss Ji, are you not used to the food, or are you going on a hunger strike to resist?" Jean Wan looked at him up and down, saying indifferently, "You're no one to me. Even if I starve to death here, it's useless. Why do I have to resist in such a stupid way? After being locked up here like an idiot for several days, anyone would lose their appetite. I can't eat anymore." Xiao Lui glanced at her again, coldly smiling. "You're quite sensible." Jean Wan glanced at him. "Seeing that I'm sensible, can you tell me why you locked me up here? Such good food and drinks may seem like nothing, but this kind of mental torture is even worse. What grudge do I have with you that you have to torture me like this?" Xiao Lui coldly withdrew his gaze and didn't answer her. He sat at the dining table, asked the servant to bring new tableware, and ate the breakfast specially prepared for him by the servant. As he ate, he said calmly, "Miss Ji, sit here and let's have a chat." Jean Wan walked over but didn't sit down. She just stood by the dining table and kept a safe distance from him. Xiao Lui didn't force her to sit down. Glancing at her guarded expression, he said indifferently, "It seems that I overestimated your position in Immerse's heart. He is indeed more ruthless and calm than I knew him. He had learned the news that you were taken away by me 5 days ago, but he still hasn't taken any action." "Really?" Jean Wan's expression was very calm. "Aren't you sad or sad? During the days I took you away, your husband didn't care about you at all. He didn't even take any action. There's nothing to be sad about. Our relationship has long been in trouble. It's normal for him to ignore me." Xiao Lui looked at her for a while and smiled coldly. "Why do I feel that you want to cry?" Jean Wan glanced at him coldly, and there was a lot of mockery in her eyes. "Do I look like I want to cry?" She obviously despised and repulsed Xiao Lui, a pervert of unknown origin, and her tone was not polite. "I'm not surprised that a man who no longer loves me can be heartless to me now. I've already cried. Do I still need to cry in front of people like you?" Xiao Lui casually smiled. "It seems that CEOMO really doesn't care about you. I thought he would do something in the dark, but he didn't do anything in the dark. It's clear that he doesn't even care about your life." Jean Wan glanced at the man who deliberately poked her heart with words. Oh. Xiao Lui suddenly smiled. Since Mo Jingshan doesn't want you, why don't you just marry me? Jean Wan, CEO Xiao, do you have any misunderstanding about a married woman? Me and you? Let's not talk about why I should marry you. I still have the title of Mrs. Mo. What qualifications do you have to stand in front of me and ask me to marry you? Speaking of which, we've only met once, and today is the second time we've met. Xiao Lui leaned back in the chair, his voice still cold. I told you, you gave the rabbit I raised for many years to Qin sighting. Now you're the substitute rabbit. Since you're a substitute, there's no need for any feelings. Just stay in the cage obediently. Eat whatever I tell you to eat and do whatever I tell you to do. There's no reason. You really are a pervert. Jean Wan impatiently frowned. Since Mo Jingshan doesn't intend to save me, why do you still keep me locked up? You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.